Good evening and welcome to the Senior Synth stream. Today is a busy day for most people, so we only have two guests so far, but you're welcome to join the stream if you want to. The link is in the chat, pinned to the top. Welcome to Andy. You're muted.
You auto-muted me, I think. Hey, how's it going?
And that's guest number one, and the second guest is Steve Cresshead.
Hi.
Welcome. Yeah, welcome. Today the topic is about effects. But before we start, let's hear what have you done this week, Andy?
Oh boy. Most of the same old stuff. As you know, I have a science channel, Micro Addict. I did a recent one with some nice critters from the Baylands, and had some as a surprise afternoon streams. A bunch of these guys actually jumped in there, which is pretty cool to watch and comment on stuff. So that was fun. I also did what was it? Last night? I think it was last night. I'm losing track of time these days. It's a Senior Synth stream, right? So, but last night I did a stream with a couple apps and stuff and weird controllers. The Oddball controller, that Life thing that Ty Unwin talked about a while back. It's an app combo with a desktop app, and you go field recordings and make stuff and do drum beats and things like that. And I also did one with some phase plant stuff with the Rolly Seaboard, just so people, if they haven't heard it, with MPE and stuff. It's all plug and play. It's very good and Ableton Live. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah. And Steve, what have you done this week?
I did a little video on a wind synth, how to play like a nursery rhyme on it, just how to do it basically. Put that up and did a AI track, artificial intelligence track, nursery rhyme. Put that up yesterday, and I had a jam yesterday with my guitarist friend on an RC505 all afternoon. That was brilliant. Just like, you get like 4 bars going and you put up loads of different guitars and effects and stuff, and just messing around with that. Mainly messing around with the effects, actually. Putting some crazy effects on guitars just to make it like different, like ring modulators and stuff like that. It's cool.
Oh,
So
okay.
more or less.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue with the effects then. First, what are your favorite effects? What are you using the most?
Andy, you go first.
I'm gonna have to think a little bit about that because I've been doing lots of weird different things. Go ahead. You've been using more effects lately probably than I have, so go ahead and start.
What most used effect? I would say the most used effect that I have that is always used, parametric EQ. That's the most used effect that I use. Then after that, probably delay. But yeah, EQ on everything. Just to make things fit in mixes, make things not muddy. It's like the most important effect you can put on it. So yeah.
Mine is surely echo. Echo is the first thing I put on anything, and I like when it's in stereo, so it's
the ping pong echo.
Yeah. And sometimes I overdo it, so when I add other instruments, I have to remove some of it. But that's
Yeah,
it gets a bit busy, doesn't it, sometimes?
Yeah. It's easy.
Yeah, delay is definitely my favorite. Of course, reverb as well, too. But whatever flavor, it depends on the moment, obviously, with the instrument I'm doing, how many things are layered, how busy it's going to be. Because adding too many effects can get kind of crazy, muddy, wacky.
It can get mushy.
Because it's adding frequencies and, it's doing other stuff in there. So, but... it really depends. And then if I'm using some other weird instrument, then I'll use something like a microcosm, which is a hodgepodge of a bunch of stuff going on at once. So it's all situational, really.
Yeah. I will try to invite some more people. So if you two just talk, then I'll work on that and
Okay.
get back to you.
How about this then, Andy? Would you agree or disagree that effects are basically? I've got a list of 5 things. There are 5 things that can be involved in an effect. So I'll be making notes. Sorry, I'm a bit of a nerd.
Go for it, yeah.
So you've got pitch. You can change the pitch of something, which might be like a chorus. You can change the volume of something, which might be like a tremolo or a slicer, something like that. You've got time-based effects, which is like a delay. You've got EQ-based effects, which you could, along EQ and pitch, you could like make phasers and flangers and stuff like that. And then the last one is you've got like a sound stage type effect, which might be reverb or panning or placement in the 3D space. So there's basically like 5 types of effects. And then do you think that covers every effect that's out there? Or am I wrong?
For the most part, I mean, you have, you can add filter as an effect, right? You can
filters
add
EQ, isn't it?
EQ, yeah. So being the EQ thing, but resonant filter being special, obviously. But yeah, I generally, like I was saying in the beginning, I generally go for a time-based or a reverby type thingy, just because they bring things to life. You pull out even an amazing synth that doesn't have any built-in effects, and it can sound really growly or a lot of character, a lot of different timbral changes with LFOs and other kinds of stuff. But it's still kind of dead, right? You need some life in there. So you want to put it in a space, or you want to make it bounce around, or classic Berlin school. You can't just do arpeggios. You have to have arpeggiators going with delay. So you get overlapping lines and stuff. So
delay
those are my 2 main ones.
Delay seems a bit cleaner usually than reverb. You can put more things with delay, depending on how long
Unless
the
it's
delay
bucket
is.
brigade, yeah.
Yeah, and it gets really mushy really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But it can't go wrong with delay. So I like when, like, for example, when I got my Novation X stations, it's, it wasn't a groundbreaking thing at the time. The Nova engine had been out for years and years and years. But it took all the best presets that I'd heard from the Nova, Supernova, A station, K station, all that kind of stuff, put into the box. And then I found all the presets that I didn't have and made my own custom sets and used those effects on board that were quite good. I mean, we'll get into this later, I'm sure, but a lot of the keyboard effects leave a lot to be desired because they're just kind of thrown in there as an afterthought. They don't put like the highest quality effects on a lot of keyboards.
No.
Although sometimes it works if it depends on the board, right?
So the
like
first
D50,
keyboard,
1987, right? D50, whatever, had a decent reverb on it. Had some other stuff.
I mean, the first keyboards that came out, first synths had no effects, and even some things that come out now still have no effects at all.
You go back to like the DW8000, that was like 85, and that had a couple cool effects in it, but it didn't sound as lush as a D50. And then the M1 didn't come along till a couple years after the D50. So, and it had a lot of effects on it as well. But some people say, "Oh, I hate the M1 effects." So it just depends on your taste, I guess. But
like when the DX7 came out, there was 0 effects on that. Oh, exactly, actually, no, it might be like a chorus effect, I think, probably, but that was about it.
Yeah, it's so you were pretty sparse with a lot of stuff, and starting from a young age with Casio crap keyboards that were just home keyboards from the local stores.
Yeah.
I immediately wanted to get effects for that, just because I couldn't afford a proper synth at the time. So I started getting like guitar pedals and cheap rack mounts and stuff to augment the keyboards, and that made a huge difference. You take a dull, horrible, or just boring sound, and just elevate it like crazy.
Interesting stuff.
I mean, it's not quite perfume on a pig, but it's it really depends on what effect you're putting on what preset. It's all situational. You can't just say, "Oh, I'll put an effect on this; it'll sound awesome." It doesn't always work that way, of course.
Oh, you can't put echo on strings. You won't need it there.
Yeah,
It
well,
would
that's
sound weird.
sustaining, aren't they? You won't hear them really.
These
So,
big mud, yeah. When they all overlap, the feedback is too high.
Unless you are having a sample which is ending in a bad way, then you can make a short envelope and use a reverb or a delay to make it longer. That's another way of using effects.
That's also an old trick on things that didn't have effects. Is a long release. It gives you that feeling of, oh, it's it's trailing off, like it's actually doing stuff. Some of the Casio stuff actually did that.
yeah.
And my Kawai SX240, basically the same vintage as Juno 6, Juno 60. But a little bit later, because it has really primitive MIDI, and it has basically no effects on it that I remember. But it does some of those envelope tricks where you can have things trail off for a long time.
Yeah, a bit like a sustain pedal. That's an effect, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, 'cause you're changing the basic nature of whatever sound you've got to make it last longer. So yeah, okay, that works.
So there are hacks out there too, obviously.
Yeah, we probably didn't have effects in, or we're very sparse on effects in the beginning, because if you looked at what a effect is, that list I gave you early on, you got a pitch, you got volume, you got time change, you got EQ, and you got like a sound stage type thing. That's all the same elements of actually making a synthesizer, because you got the you got your pitch oscillator, you've got your volume oscillator, you got time, which is like an ADSR, or you might be a way of delaying it. You got EQ, which is like having a filter. That's all the same type of ingredients of actually making a synthesizer. So in early synths, to add an effect, you're basically saying, I want to make two synthesizers, one to make the sounds and one to make the sound better. That's probably
it's
what we
basically
never had.
pitch, volume, and timbre. Those are the three main components. So
yeah. So I mean, a very early synths, we probably had things like, I think that the first effects we had were basically ensemble and chorus as an effect was probably the earliest effect.
Yeah.
And then we might have got delay. I'm not sure, but this is
chorus or flanger. You can.
Yeah, we're talking like 40 years ago. I mean,
phase shifter. Phase shifter's pretty old.
Yeah.
Spring reverbs are.
Oh yeah, spring reverb. Yeah.
Spring and plate. Yeah.
Yeah, the 2600 had a reverb, didn't it? Yeah, had a reverb tank in it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well spotted.
And the first delays were Bucket
Brigade. Yeah, I bought mine from Kane's catalog. It was awful. But it was a delay. It's like, well, I can do something that I can't do. So it's cool. Well, we're talking like.
Oh, go ahead.
So we're talking like 80s. That's like 40 odd years ago, isn't it? So things have moved on ever so slightly since then. So,
once the synth started going crazy with the effects, like the Novation stuff I mentioned, or later on the Virus TI, they started building entire sets of presets just around effects. And so people always complain, oh, if you turn the effects off, the patches sound like crap, because they're really integral to the patch. You needed those effects to make the patch what it was. It's like a crutch in some ways, but I think they sound great a lot of times. So I'm okay with the crutch, to make that part of your sound design, as long as it's there.
Well, it like you say, it extends what you can do as a patch designer, having effects. You're not just limited to what oscillators you've got. You can like mess around with things and make it a bit wacky and interesting. When you've got like a preset list, you'll have a few wacky effects, and they're usually the ones with like the effects going nuts, that not mega musical, but if you're in a music store, it's ones that go, oh, that's different. So, whatever works in it to help sell the product, I suppose.
Yeah, because sometimes they do drown it way too much. You're like, all right, they're a little heavy-handed on the reverb on this one. So you can't mix it with other presets. You have to go in and edit it, because it's just going to step on everything,
Spring reverbs. I hate spring reverbs.
Really?
I was so glad of getting rid of my spring reverb back in the day. I had
It depends. Yeah.
I had a brown, yeah, but we're talking like early 80s. So you had, so I had a reverb, spring reverb, in a little brown box with a brown controller. Why things were brown, I don't know. Didn't make it. Well, I suppose it did make it cheaper. But when I got an SPX 90, it was like, goodbye, spring reverb. Don't want to see you ever again. So but now they're back in vogue again, aren't they? It's a character. It's a character of a reverb. It's not real reverb. It's a bit like plate reverb. It's like pretend reverb.
Well, they're also tactile too, because you can bang them. You can scrape the springs if you have access to the springs. And
yeah.
it's great as an effect,
And yes, Inky, I did get my delay from K's catalogue. Yeah, those are the days, eh? £2 a week to get a delay unit. Crazy stuff.
Because even the OP1 has a virtual spring reverb on board, and you can actually see the spring, and you can change the tautness of the spring, and kind of the length of the spring, and it has some visual parameters, so you know what you're doing with the knobs. And,
yeah, they did.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's really good.
I built my own spring reverb in the late 1978, I think. When building it yourself, it's I didn't have it in a case, so it was just a print, and the reverb, the spring reverb itself, was mounted above. It didn't sound the same as if you hit a guitar amp. That's the best thing about a spring reverb, I think. That's the sound when you are kicking a guitar amp.
That's what I was going to say, because guitarists have known about those forever because of surf guitar and all the old days of spring reverbs and amps. Yeah. Whereas a lot of keyboard guys didn't even know about that much, or just didn't have exposure to it because it was more of a guitar thing for a long time.
Yeah.
Except for the ARP 2600, things like that.
Yeah, Jamie from GeoSynth, I think he started his channel all about guitar pedals and things for use on his synthesizer. That's how his channel started, I believe.
I didn't know that.
Okay, I didn't know. No, neither do I.
Mm-hmm. Is that old stuff still up there, or you take it down? Do you know?
He said it once ages ago on one of his streams, but I've not looked back to see if he's still got them. I mean, if they're like really early, maybe he's taken them down or hidden them or something. You never know. If you've got to start somewhere, but sometimes you go, yeah, that wasn't very good, was it? And you go, delete. Yeah, so you never know.
Yeah, the other classic one obviously is the Synth AKS, had the spring reverb, and then you could bang it. And the fun thing about that is you could also modulate as it was reverberating. You could run it back through. Yeah, a guy showed me at a synth meet once who was actually like an expert in this thing. And he goes, check this out. And he hits it and he starts tweaking it. And it sounded like a rattlesnake. Go. It was, capturing the, it was like in a loop back kind of thing. It was pretty clever. So yeah, if you know how to wrangle that stuff, you can use it for some fun effects, not just a reverb.
Okay, so let's chuck it forward then. What is, or we've sort of been through the history-ish of what effects are. What is the cutting edge effect in 2024? Where are we on effects? In the evolution of what we can do and what's available. What's the thing?
Everybody today is using compression.
Compression.
Yeah, that's an effect too, but it's important to have the same levels when you release music. So compression is the most used effect, I think. Oh, you're muted, Andy.
Sorry, I was going to say to change the color of the sound, the punch and things like that. Compression is amazing. I'm still not very good at compression. I got to learn more.
Yeah, it's a whole art form, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. But I mean, the big thing in the like the late '90s, it seemed like harmonizers got more powerful, right? So you'd like virtual choirs and stuff. Like Imogen Heap did that song "Hide and Seek," where she's MIDI controlling her own voice as a choir inside of the box, and you could actually do that at that time and and get something that sounded fairly realistic, not just completely fakey, right? And that stuff has just gotten better and better. The TC Helicon one I have is amazing. So harmonizing is a pretty special thing. And you look at the old Eventide ones from the 80s and 90s. They could do it, but it just had that classic, Munchkin giant kind of thing. You change the pitch, it doesn't sound right. It's fun, but it doesn't sound accurate.
Yeah, it's at the far end of the spectrum. It had no nuance, did it? It was like all or nothing type of thing.
Just like samplers before they developed the time stretch algorithms, where it's just like,
Yeah.
And it's nice when they figure that out. So you could just put one sample on a key, spread it out, and it would be playable, without being too silly.
Yeah, I think the Electron KO2 has got a good pitch shifter on that for when you sample something musical and it sounds pretty good all over the keyboard. So yeah.
Oh, maybe I hadn't played with it that much. Maybe they added a little more to it because unfortunately, OPZ, OP1 are more classic samplers where they just speed up and slow down.
Yeah. I think you've got that as a choice, but it's also got one that doesn't do that.
Okay, cool. That's good to know.
He does better time stretching. He's got new algorithms that work better. So yeah.
So that just because of processing power, I'd say that was a huge one for a while. Is to be able to do proper pitch shifting and harmonizing. But lately, thankfully they kind of got rid of the auto tune stuff for the most part. You only hear it once in a while.
I use it all the time.
That, you know what I mean, though. As the effect, though.
The T-Pain thing. Yeah.
The T-Pain painful thing. Yes, exactly. There's even a preset on the TC Helicon Voice Live 2 called T-Painful.
Yeah. I think I've got something similar on the Akai. It's like, crunch to death sort of version of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's again, it's a characterful thing, isn't it? You might use it occasionally. You might use it on 4 words in a whole song just for
it was the modern version of a talk box, basically.
Yeah.
Like it's automated talk box.
Yeah, it's a bit like putting a vocoder on. It's that sort of effect.
And vocoder, but more like a talk box, like Zapp and Roger kind of stuff and all that. Or Stevie Wonder. If you look at the old Stevie Wonder video of him doing that talk box with the Moog, it's pretty amazing.
Lady Aptitude had just come up and said granular. Yeah, granular effects are in vogue, aren't they?
Granular's big.
That's fairly recent, isn't it? Granular. It's not.
Well, here's the funny thing: you can fake it in some older gear if you know how to tweak it, because all you're doing is shifting the playback of the sample a certain way. And I've actually gotten it to work on even something as silly as an app on the iPad or iPhone, where you record your voice into it or anything. You see the waveform, you can scrub through the waveform, but you can select the tiniest slice of the waveform, very carefully drag and get a little line.
Yeah.
And now you swipe and it's moving that section back and forth very quickly, which is basically granular, right? And then you put reverb on it and delay and stuff. And now you have like a synth out of something that never sounded like a synth, like a voice or whatever. So the technology's been there for a long time. If you know how to leverage the stuff, it's just now it's kind of a commonplace thing as a granular thing.
It probably got invented as some sort of accident, someone messing around.
I'm sure it did, yeah.
Like a lot of these things probably did as well.
Yeah. So some of these things that people who are way into this stuff, like the really nerdy types, that probably say, "Oh, I've done that 20 years." Where you guys been? Where have you guys been? Right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But now it's in vogue, and they have actual dedicated granular synths out there, and so I'm happy for it. It's a cool thing.
Most modern synths have like 3 effects sections, don't they? They have like a delay section, a reverb section, and then a everything else section. Usually, that's how, like a modulation section, isn't it? Like for chorus and that type of thing. So that seems to be where it is. And some synthesizers in their modulation section only have like 2 or 3 things, whereas other synths, like if you go to like Roland, they'll have like 90 different effects. They go over the top on it.
Yeah. The other thing that's cool too is like Electron. You take like the A4, analog 4 analog keys, where it actually has of the multiple tracks you can choose to do things on. There's a MIDI track and there's an effects track. So just like you can do on the OP1 OPZ, you can have an effects track be tweaked by modulation sources and stuff, and various step parameters, and step locking and stuff, which a lot of things just can't do still. That's pretty special, because then now it's not just regular effects anymore. It's like effects on that step, and then you go to the next step and it's a totally different effect or no effect.
Yeah. Key locking effects. Yeah.
That's really clever. Yeah, it's
Well, yeah, you can have like a drum line, and you can tell it to say just on the second hit of the snare drum, put reverb on it, and the other ones don't do that.
Especially when you put conditions on there where not only just the second hit, but the second hit on like 3 passes will do it.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, they can just put some math functions in there. It's pretty clever.
I think that's where it's probably moving forward. That's where it's not actually new effects, it's how you're using the effect. It's probably where it's at in 2024 and recent sort of years, because you've got like things like the wave state, where what you're doing is you're as an effect, you're actually changing your waveform, and you can make a sequence of waveforms that change,
or how you make the thing, that little ball that you can move.
Oh yeah,
it moves around the screen.
XY effects. I mean, they were in vogue when we did what was the first one? Something like a D50 was probably the first one, and then we got the TG33 and but they seem to come and go as a device that you would see on an actual physical.
They were more for mixing though, mixing the amounts of a partial.
Yeah.
Or something, not so much the effects. I don't know if you could ever do the effects on those. I forgot if you could or not. You'd mostly just move the partial around.
Yeah, you're doing like volume mixing of 4 different channels, aren't you?
Essentially, it's a mixer.
Yeah, but that's on the very occasion. It's not a thing we see on every synthesizer.
No.
But also we get that. What's the other Korg one? Not the waves. The mod wave with the XY pad. There's that as well.
Yeah. And that's why I like that X Station when I got it, because it was like a glorious XY pad for doing stuff. And it also gave you a joystick as well. So you had a choice which one you wanted to use. And you could also unlock the joystick so it floated. It didn't have to be sprung. So
okay. You could leave it where you wanted it to be.
Yeah, which was unusual at the time, because it was mostly for pitch bend mod kind of functions. But if you wanted to have it float a little bit more, you could do that. It's pretty clever.
The other thing we don't see on synthesizers that often is more than 2 wheels. You usually have a pitch bend wheel and a mod wheel, and that's it. I mean, I remember on my SY77 had 3. You had a third wheel that I think you could. It probably had a preset what it always did, but you could program it to do something different. So
Lisa's Ion had 3 wheels.
Right. Okay.
A few other ones did at the time. What's really crazy is the Techniques WSA1 physical modeling synth, where it has 3 wheels, 2 joysticks, and this ball thing. So it's like
you need to be an octopus to use it. Basically,
it's pretty wacky but fun. I really like it. So that's.
One of the things is, I suppose, if you have your synth sequenced, then you've got your hands are free to mess around with the wheels and stuff, aren't they? So it depends how you use it.
Yeah.
When we're talking about how we use it, when did synthesizers? When did the modulation matrix change to enable changing effects? I mean, if you had a D20 in the late 80s, you could only synchronize the delay to MIDI sync. That was the only thing you could do to any of the effects in it. Today you can modulate it any way you want to. When did all that change, and which synthesizers did it at first?
Don't know. It's
Well, it's funny because some of that came from modular too, right? I mean, modular's been doing that kind of wacky stuff for a long time, even the 5U stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on exactly what feature you wanted to modulate, because there was I think it was a kind of a threshold where the floodgates were opened for keyboards, but
yeah, it'll be different manufacturers chasing a feature list, wouldn't it? To say like,
yeah.
buy mine, So if they have the computing power inside a digital synth, and they're thinking, well, ours just looks like, if it's Roland might say, well, ours just looks like Yamaha. If we had this, then we're different. So that might be the way it got driven, where they say, well, we've still got some computing power left inside the digital synth. We can do this with it as a differentiator on trying to sell it.
Yeah.
But also on modular, you get on modular stuff, you go like, okay, so I've got room left on the faceplate. I can add a couple more out points or in points. So how about I modulate this, that, and the other? So again, it might be a thing. You're trying to make your product look more interesting than the competition. So competition can drive creativity quite a bit.
Well, and that's the funny thing too with horsepower and all that, different amounts of memory and CPU inside these synthesizers and samplers and stuff. And for example, back to the Virus TI, I got it early on when they still hadn't added a bunch of cool features to it, and because it has the circuitry to pass through things, not just all internal, so you could use it as an FX box for some other synth if you wanted to. They thought outside the box and said, well, let's add some other cool stuff that people would want to process. So they added a slicer. They added, I think it was called atomizer. They added a whole bunch of other cool things in software revs over a couple of years to extend the life of the box way beyond, the basic stuff it came with. They occasionally add a new filter. They would add a new effect of some kind. And a lot of the effects were aimed at passing things through, whether guitar, vocals, or another synth. And that's pretty cool when manufacturers do that, where they don't necessarily say this is a baked item. We're going to continue to add stuff later. As
they
time
keep
goes
giving
by.
you value for money, don't they? As you
Or new ideas. Like, oh, we didn't even think about that. Hey, they've got that. Let's do that. And so they put it, put in the thing. And so that's a lot of fun too. That not only makes it worth your money so much more for what you paid for, but it gives these instruments more of a cult status of all the stuff they can do, and the fact that they just go beyond their normal scope, which is a lot of fun.
I think an important thing for the success of any effect that you're going to put in it is, well, two things. One, the presets that it comes with. You might have a great effect with terrible presets, and people think, "Oh, this effect is rubbish." So you need to make good presets as a starting point, and then also the interface of how you go and change it. Sometimes you get effects that are so deep, you go like, it's got like 8 pages, thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing here. Forget it. You need to be.
Oh, yeah.
You need to make an effect approachable for the average user to want to spend time on that, like menu screen or the amount of knobs they've got on a physical piece of kit to change it, and that's got to be a difficult thing to balance. I know that Boss made a thing. They had like a company-wide thing when they made a effects pedal for whatever it was. It was like if you have everything noon on all your pots, it sounds pretty good. So you always had a place to start,
headroom to overdrive and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. To think about standardizing things, but also giving you more leeway either side.
Yeah, because some manufacturers will go and change the names of things just to make theirs look different, and all you're really doing is confusing your user.
Yeah. Oh, it's a new feature. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good evening.
It's pretty funny. Hey.
Hi, Andrew.
Hello.
You've gone all red.
Yeah.
Are you in your Roxanne moment?
Do you want to go more sort of green or blue, purple? What?
It's Roxanne. Turn on the red light, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You're in your police zone. You got a red jumper on as well. You're all Mr. Red. You're Santa. without the beard.
Oh, I've got the beard. Well, actually, no, Henrik.
Henry's got the beard. You've got a thing that might
Yeah.
be a beard at some point.
Oh, you little fucker.
We've all got to start somewhere.
It's growing on. Well, yeah. Literally, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
It's already driving me nuts. My, you can't see it, but there is a moustache there, and it's getting bushier, but it's white against this skin.
She's also,
It's just not got a chance, really.
you're lacking contrast. You need to put some effects on it. You need to put some hair dye on it or something.
Well,
Ginger's
God.
good. Everybody
No.
likes ginger.
No, I was talking to my wife about this earlier, saying, do you know, should I just, I could do stripes or something. And she said, you'd look like such a knob. And then she said, but you
Why don't
already
you
do,
do it?
so do what you like, really.
What's new? My guitarist dyed his beard purple the other day, and I only spotted it yesterday. It's like, have you dyed your beard? And I went, yeah. Like,
No, it's normally purple.
Weird. He's got a purple beard. Yeah.
So how's the chat go? I'm sorry I'm late to this. I've been I'm been tied up with a bunch of other things and a glass or three of wine.
Oh,
Wow. Yeah.
so you're well lubricated.
I'm reasonably well lubricated, yes.
Nice.
So have you been talking about things to do with effects in synthesizers and what's been
Mostly in, but obviously you got to comment on some modular stuff because a lot of it starts in the modern modular. New ideas get baked there, and then they end up in other stuff because they go off the rails in clever ways. And they end up in keyboards?
What's been the consensus of opinion on the use of effects inbuilt into synths and its history and use? What's been the consensus on that?
Basically, it started with like Echo and what do you say? Echo was an early one. Chorus was an early one, and
at some point,
um,
run through reverbs.
yeah, spring reverbs as well. Yeah, and then,
And then-
went nuts after that. Once we got into the digital domain, everything went a bit crazy, and we got everything.
Yeah, then patches were literally built around effects. So
Yeah.
But the effects themselves were gradually getting slightly better, but they were always kind of shitty-ish. But that was part of the sound, right?
it's part of the sound.
Well, yeah, well, even spring reverb was pretty shit, but people love it, as noted tonight. So, it depends on your viewpoint on if it's great or not great. Like some people hate the ideas. Like some people spend their entire lives trying to make the sound as pristine and perfect and clean and no low noise floor and everything's wonderful. And someone goes along, yeah, I like lo-fi actually, so I want to have like, I need the vinyl scratchiness, and that's what they want. So it depends on your point of view.
You need lo-fi, then have to make it an MP3. So
Oh yeah. Yeah, so some people like wow and on some things you actually get dials for dialing in wow and flutter, and it's a thing that
Tape
people
hiss, all that.
absolutely did not want 20 years ago.
Don't get me started on that. It drives me freaking nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, wobbly.
it's Ports of Canada.
Stop! Just stop. But that's not sort of the kind of effect. I mean, I was thinking about this the last couple of days actually, and I think what I found interesting is right at the beginning when I started playing with synths, which was back in the late 70s. I had a mono synth and I came across a Bucket Brigade device. I think it was a Carlsborough delay, which was really short, and someone else had an MXR phaser. And I plugged both of those onto the output, the mono output of a Transcendent 2000, which was a kit build thing, which came from Electronic Musician.
Yeah.
And suddenly, I mean, I was already in trance with the synth because I was starting to make the sounds that I was hearing at the time with filters and resonance and shaping the sound so it started sounding a bit more textural and orchestral and like real instruments, and then like not at all like real instruments. And as soon as I put the BBD on, and the phaser, it was just suddenly, it was up there, and I was lost in it. And I think that take a step forward 50 years or so, it's pretty hard to find one of these things now without a gazillion effects on, most of which are pretty good. Yeah, they're okay. Some of them are excellent. But I think the focus on flaws in the recording process, which is to do with tape flutter, wow, and all that sort of thing. That's not effects. That's a workflow thing that was built in, inherent in the thing. And kind of what I miss is the juice I got from taking a sound which was one oscillator, one filter, 24 dB filter, monophonic keyboard with no aftertouch or anything else, and sticking it through a very tiny delay and a phaser, and going, wow. And suddenly that sound was something I ended up using on something because it started a whole train of thought, and I could hear it with real guitars and drums and all sorts of things. I could hear it doing all this stuff.
Effects can be, you have to, well, not have to. I've noticed that when I'm doing stuff, you have to have a balance of what you're playing with. Sometimes you can overdo effects, and it ends up mushy and rubbish. Sometimes you need an effect and it works, and sometimes you naturally go to add effects to everything, and sometimes you go like, hang on a minute, mute that effect. Actually, that sounds better. So sometimes you need a contrast of where you've got some things in your mix with effects, and some things might be like completely dry, no effect whatsoever on it, but that helps that particular part you're playing with do a job better than it was doing with an effect on it. Sometimes, and I think you need to try both, don't you? I mean, and I
think one of the reasons that's kind of the case. It's like when I have bass players come into the studio to play bass, I always ask them, I've got an amp, I've got a SVT rig that, for bass players. And I just say, bring your pedals, bring your guitar. I'm just going to mic the amp up. I'm not going to take a DI. I'm just going to take the sound, because you know your sound, right? You know your sound, and you may have an octave, an octave divider. You may have compressor. You may have all sorts of things there. But once you stick them on, that's your sound. Let's work with that, and then we'll do everything else after. I'm not going to try and second guess the sound by recording you DI and then doing all my stuff to it. You get the sound, and that way we can work with it. And I've always got really, really, really good results from that. And I think with synths, what happened was, because effects give it that body, people got into the thing, especially with the demo things of synths, of building patches that had all the effects on. Because standalone, without anything else in there, it sounds great. It's kind of, it sounds great, right? You go, oh, that's good. But you put that in with a track, and it's kind of, oh, dial that back a bit, please, or do whatever. And then as synths evolved, and we started getting more multi-timbral synths with multi-timbral with multi-timbral effects, with effects, assignable effects. You could use more of that synth within a track, so you'd use more and more of it as the basis, or at least one of a group of instruments that you were going to have. And because it was all in one place, then you could adjust the effects globally and between all of these things, so it sat in the track more comfortably. And that's certainly the case with these kinds of things. You tend to now be able to dial in how much or how little you want, because it's part of the overall sound. But I think you're right that Steve, that the temptation is to throw effects on everything, and I tend to start from ground zero. From okay, let's start here. What have we got? None of the effects on. What's it doing?
Well, the overdone preset is like the guy getting a word processor for the first time and having 10 fonts in the same document. I'm like, no. Yeah. Stop it.
Well, that's the PowerPoint syndrome, isn't it? Where the PowerPoints, the first PowerPoints everyone does, have a bazillion different fonts, some of which have drop shadows. And all of that. And you just go, that looks like shit. It's noise. That's what it is. It's noise. And it's the same with effects on these things, drums
I
and
think
God
it's
knows
a,
what
it's
else.
a good thing.
But it did happen with music through time. For example, the gated reverb was suddenly used on everything, and
80s,
the
80s.
same with if you hear the first albums from Depeche Mode, reverb, lots of reverb.
Oh yeah, it's a vogue, wasn't it? Yeah.
That all those things happened or demonstrates what was available of effects at the time. So, but it was really overdone, gated reverb on drums at a time. I remember in the early 80s.
But it was the sound. I remember doing a session. I'd been working. I had my own studios by 1984, 85, something like that. Had my first studio, or partner in a studio, and then others, and then so on and so forth. And I remember thinking I was pretty shit hot because I had all these effects. I had a rack of effects. I had reverbs and delays and compress and God knows what else. But mostly it's the reverbs and delays, right? And I went to do a session. I got asked to go and do a session with Cold Cut, and I walked in. They were late into the studio, but I was there. I got there, and I'd pre-wired everything, so I had all the reverbs and things set up, ready to go. And they weren't that kind of a band. They were samples and loops, and just put it up dry and let's see what we got. And when they walked in, they saw the rack, and they saw that I was getting everything ready with effects returns and that, and they just said, "Don't think you're the guy for this gig." and you know what? They were absolutely right. And I was deeply puzzled, quite upset, and I learned a lesson, which is don't try to prejudge. Use your ears, work out what's needed, and work out what you have. Work out what you have.
Yeah, listen to the band,
Or listen to producers like Flood who had their own kind of sound palette. So you go to them because you want that sound palette, right?
I think for an important thing on a good synthesizer, user interface wise, is the ability to mute your effects and to change your amount, your route into pages. You might find a good preset, like what you're saying. You got a mix going. You can add your preset that sounded great on its own, and it all of a sudden doesn't sound very good, and you need to go and change it pretty quickly.
Well, the problem is sometimes it sounds amazing, but it takes too much of the attention away from everything else.
Yeah.
And that's the that's really the problem. I remember when I was working for Emu, I may have mentioned this once or twice to people. I don't know. I know very few people know that.
Learn something new every day.
And when I started working for them, they had 24-bit effects. Two 24-bit effects you could assign across everything. Their samplers, their romplers, all of those had this 24-bit, 2 times 24-bit effects you could assign, and they were okay. But it was, everyone else was moving on. And then just before their demise, they bought out the RFX chip for the EMU sampler, for the Ultra samplers. And that thing was revelatory because suddenly the sampler became not just a sampler. And by the way, the Ultras, all of the E4 samplers, they had these amazing patch chord systems, which allowed you, it was synthesis central. I remember doing demos at various trade shows where I'd just sample in 4 waveforms and start from there, just the 4, triangle, sawtooth, sine, and a pulsy thing. And I'd be playing around with those and nothing else, and using the patching to do these really sophisticated synth patches. And then they bought out RFX, and that allowed you to route stuff not only through the system internally with 14 different auxiliary sends and up to 16 effects, but it also allowed you to route stuff in live from external sources, up to 8 external sources. So you could use it kind of like a mixer, or in fact entirely like a mixer. And you could trigger effects and you could trigger filters. You can add, it suddenly became this entire system for production, which hadn't been available before. And I still use that now because I can dial stuff in and out of it really quickly. And the effects, some people don't like them. I adore them. I think they're really, really good. They're really, really flexible and they sit really well in a mix. And then there's so that was a bit of an eye opener. And then there's things like the Novation Supernova, which I have, which when it first came out had those multi effects on it. They weren't the best. Right, they were crunchy. The reverbs had zippy noise in them. They were very bit. You could hear the random fluctuations as it tapered away. You could hear the echoes. It's really an echo, but But that was also part of the sound, and that gave a sound to the Novation, which, because again it was multi-timbral, and you could assign effects in a really unique way and switch them all off or off per multi that you would put per preset you were putting out on a multi. It made it much more of a production tool, but the sound was shitty enough that it actually added character to it. Whereas now, I think what I'm missing, I've not been this is a great machine and it has some wonderful effects, but I've not been blown away by anything on here that's made me go, oh, that's a brilliant effect. I've just gone, it's a delay, it's a compressor, bit of EQ.
Do you think we've peaked on effects?
I don't think. Have we peaked?
What's the things that you would like to hear that we're not hearing? Is there anything that you can?
Character. I think one of the really interesting things on one of the other shows that I'm on, which I probably won't mention because I'll be killed by Henrik, but it is the Pro Synth Network. We had Marinelli on. Anthony Marinelli, of the 2600 and synclaviers and all sorts of things. And he has a real passion for pedals, for using pedal effects with analog synths. And I have to say, I love that way of doing things because often it's mono.
And it's hands-on.
It's hands-on and you get a bit of noise and buzz and you have to check the batteries and things. So it's never quite, and it's all these knobs which you hope to get kind of right. You can put in effects boards that are all MIDI and everything, but you can use just genuinely...
It's basically extended modular because...
Sort of, because you never quite get exactly the same sound twice, right? And there's something glorious about that. That's something because... when the sound is working, then you play to that sound and therefore you compose to that sound and you arrange and you produce to that sound.
I think where we're currently at the minute, effects of where they're going. I think probably the thing that's slowly being picked up by everybody is animating your effect on a sequence. And Electron probably started that, but even my little Roland compact S1 thing, you can animate all the effects on it. It's not just how much of that effect do you want on your bass sound. It's like how much do you want on that one note, and then how much do you want to pull it off and then change it. I think that's where it's going.
Well, again, modular really started that because it's always modulating everything. So
yeah, but this modulating everything. This is modulating one particular note
and effects.
But I think that's what the EMU-R effects really did well back in 2000, 2001 was every single effect. You could not only control what effect was, which preset or voice was going to each effect, but when it came in, when it wasn't out, you could change things like the wet-dry mix, you could change the length of things like reverb tails or delays, you could change all sorts of stuff, panning, all in real time or with MIDI controllers, which is where this kind of thing came in, this bugger came in because you had all these knobs and buttons that you could assign stuff with, right?
I've got a question then. So the newest synths that are out there, so we've got your Yamaha Montage as an example as a new synth. You also got new analog synths like there's things from Moog and whatever. Can you dial in like the amount of reverb on, or is it on the whole patch?
It depends. Each synth and each manufacturer has a different topology for how they handle effects. The ones that do it most successfully tend to do it like I guess, tend to do it. So it's like a mixing bus. So you can assign an effect both globally or to a channel or to an auxiliary, and then also on a per preset basis. The problem with that is you can do it exactly that. You can add effects everywhere. The number of times I've been on this looking at a preset, which I think that's quite nice, but I wish I could get rid of. And then you've got to find exactly where.
Where is it? Where is that effect?
tangle
Yeah.
it up.
Yeah.
Because each preset has its own set, and then the actual performance, the performance has its own set of effects.
Yeah, you got to
and then
figure out,
there's
is it a performance effect? Is it an insert effect?
and then
Is
there's a
it blend
global
Which
effect.
blend effect is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But which means it starts getting kind of complex kind of quickly. And that's annoying. So having that simpler topology is good, but pretty much all of them, it depends how they've done the coding. I think there's been a lack of attention by some manufacturers in being able to control all the parameters, because you should be able to control reverb length, tail, early reflection, hall type. Same with delays, whether or not it's what sort of a delay it is, ping pong.
Some you don't. Some just get it's hall. That's it. And how much of it you want.
And how much you want. So that's kind of where it all gets up, and that's where you start using external effects, or you start bringing it in through your door.
And it's be careful what you wish for. It gets too complicated too fast. So
there's a balance, isn't there? I suppose adding stuff and then like complicating stuff. It depends what you're trying to achieve, and then you've got to think of your user, what's there, how do they use it.
And I think often, probably the biggest driver for me with effects in synths is avoid the really big reverbs, unless you're doing it for live, where you want that particular sound, and even then probably leave it to the engineer right out front, the front of house guy.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing that, then anything else, your delays are part of the sound, because you're building up a rhythmic pattern, right? As long as you don't swamp it and it's not, but delays tend to be part of a rhythmic thing that you're doing. They tend to be.
Delays are a clearer way of adding depth to your sound than reverb. Reverb is like throwing something in a big bucket of water. You just get it soaked. It's like, it depends what you're doing.
So what do you think? What effects do you guys think we're waiting for, if any? Henrik, what's your thoughts on that?
I'll pass it on to Andy.
If we are waiting for them, then it can only be delay.
Well, yeah.
Very good.
Meme of the day. There you go.
Now, is that a verb?
Yeah.
Is it a verb? It's a reverb, yeah.
Right. I mean, I keep on thinking that we've done everything.
But it's spring.
So go on, Andy. What about you? Andy, what about you?
So real quick, what you're talking about, that RFX thing, it's like hen's teeth. It's as rare as hell. I've never even had a chance to try it after I heard about it. I wish I could get my hands on it.
I've got two.
Oh, you're so lucky. So later on, Kurzweil and the vast architecture of the 2000s and stuff had KDFX, which are also incredibly high quality, routable. A lot of the magic you mentioned from RFX. So other manufacturers have gone down that road of doing high quality, super malleable, tweakable effects and routable and all that stuff. So I think it's just more of that. Like Electron, obviously, that are the recent kings of fine-tuning your effects to the step, which is completely insane. If you haven't tried or heard it,
it's very nerdy, isn't it? As a workflow.
It's nerdy, but it's so powerful and so amazing. Hard to set up sometimes, or hard to get your head around it when you don't know what when you get introduced to it. But once you get in that mindset and that workflow, it's super powerful. So I think more manufacturers may start doing that, or do more of this grandiose effects platform like KDFX or RFX or whatever, or some hybrid of the two. Otherwise, it's kind of the same old shit, right? So
what do you think is the? I mean, sorry, it is Steve, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So Steve? What do you think? Do you think there's anything missing? Or do you think there's anything we're waiting for?
I'm surprised. This is going to be unpopular. Then again, I think generally synthesizer manufacturers are incredibly lazy in driving anything forward. It's like it's how long? 50 years. And where have we got really? Not very far, have we? We added analog oscillators, and then we had samplers in the 80s, and then nothing for the last 30 years.
So, okay, so with the kind of effects that are out there, what do you think is the last significant effect that came out anywhere on any platform? The last significant effect that's become part of the common mainstream. What's the last one that came out that everyone's using, or you know, what's the last one or two that you can think of?
Granular.
Granular processing of some kind. Yeah.
That's not an effect. That's not an effect. There
are granular effects, though. They're called granular effects.
Okay.
So they're using the technology.
It's a bit like a delay when you take part of it, isn't it? So yeah, granular is I think granular is. I would say granular is more popular than it's actually used. Popular as in people hear of it, but it's not. I don't hear it that often. So it might be popular, but it's not very well used.
It's installed, it's just not used.
Inky mentioned shimmer reverb. Which is dead again.
Yeah.
Which is essentially a Lex reverb with all the chorus and all the other delays and things. It's been done, but they're calling it a shimmer reverb to try and simulate that lush, rich reverb that's been around for the last 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah. Like I say, there's not a lot of new going on, really.
So perhaps let's just have a look at some of the effects. So there's things like, which you'll hate, auto-tune.
I use your auto-tune all the time because I'm a crap singer. So I love it.
As a tune function, it's okay. It's the extremes that got overused. Yeah. Like the Cher song and all the T-Pain stuff and all that.
Yeah, but again, that's a genre. That's and it's a genre we don't like. So therefore, it's okay for those who like it. So it wouldn't have existed if our autotune was not invented.
But that's a bit like, you know, sorry to cut in, but that is a bit like people say autotune's terrible, and I don't particularly like it being used on tracks, but that's me singing. However, you can use it on all sorts of other instruments in really weird ways. Right. Same with vocoders. I use vocoders a lot, but I use them for things like chords, using a drum pattern to trigger it, or a guitar, a rhythm guitar, triggering a pad of some sort, or the rhythm guitar driving the backing vocals to give it that just a little bit of give it that groove and
harmonies.
Yeah. So, and then there's formant-based stuff. So, and the reason I'm asking this is, what's the next? Is there a next leap, or do we have enough, and we're just not being creative enough with them?
Well, if you look at the modular landscape of effects, there's some weird stuff that's not in keyboards yet. Wagyu even mentioned it. We both have the Hyperion effects processor made by. Oh damn it! I'm drawing a blank on it. He's the guy who invented the module of the month, Paul something. Anyway, he made this really cool effects processor, multi-effects processor, aimed at modular but could be used by anything, and it had like spectral processing, all kinds of really weird algorithms in there that nobody really uses, except in modular or some other flavor of this and that. So, if you want to see the stuff that's groundbreaking and being tested out with a bunch of weird equipment.
So when you say spectral, what was spectral processing doing specifically?
It's modifying the harmonics in a certain way. I can't explain it. I haven't used it for probably 6 months or more, but it's an incredible little box. And he, being a modular guy from the old 5U days, and being into unusual stuff and being a clever programmer, he came up with these great algorithms that nobody was using, either replicas of famous algorithms or brand new stuff or mix and match. And so those kind of guys are trailblazing in a lot of ways.
So what's it called?
The Hyperion 5200. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Paul Schreiber.
I'm just looking it up now.
It's Modular of the Month. He's the original guy who did Modular of the Month format. 5U stuff.
I'm getting a battery pack at the moment. Hang on. Let's go to
Variant
effects.
5200. Wagoo's in chat. He's got it. Yeah, Paul Schreiber. Synthesis Technologies. That's it.
Synthesis Technologies.
He just retired, by the way. So if you want to get one now, because they probably have almost no stock left. He's been in the business a long time. But they're really clever. They're large, so they're going to take up a lot of your. Probably better in a boat or some kind of external case instead of taking up a lot of room in your main case.
You're talking about the 520.
Yeah, is it 520, not 5200? Is that what it is? Add an extra number. Hyperion. It's called Hyperion processor.
Cloud Terrarium, quad morphing.
He also did a lot of cool stuff with his oscillators and stuff are wild.
E520.
E520, that's it. And I just noticed Hyperion most of the time, but it had a lot of crazy algorithms in it and nice visual feedback. Those kind of guys, or like 4MS with their pingable delays and weird tweaks, and a bunch of other companies who do modular effects. They're way outside the
musical
box.
Though, or is it just a weird?
Oh yeah,
beeps?
No, it can be. It's just the average person doesn't use it musically. They just do like bleep, 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 bleep. You know,
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah,
but that's the user, not the tool, right?
Well, yeah.
You can make horrible camel hair paintings, camel hair paintbrush paintings, or you can make a beautiful camel hair paintbrush.
Yeah,
painting.
that's the same with auto pitch and the same with gated reverb. It's how much and what extreme you use it at. Exactly. Shouldn't define what it is. It depends who's using it.
It's just the most common use. Yeah.
But
okay.
You asked about what's. We can get back to this because you're looking it up. But you asked about what is the next big thing. I think it's something with AI.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Perhaps something with filtering or out or adding bands like EQ bands like
I reckon we'll probably get
like when you take the drums
tools.
out of a track, when you filter that out,
right, yeah.
Then I think something about something opposite will happen, where you can add something that doesn't exist, but by describing it, you can add it.
But they have
you might get a stem separation where you're pulling out drums and you're saying use that drum line, but make a vocal line from the drum line. You probably get something like that. Something really wacky.
But when you create things which are not there, but I'm thinking more about creating than taking apart. Of course, you can call it mixing, but when it doesn't exist, then you're adding something, you're describing.
So one of the things which the RFX was very clever with was the routing. So you could route, for instance, you could apply effects in all sorts of different orders, multiples of them, to something, and then break them out and send them off also to other effects or to other aux sends, and then feed them back into its own voice, which wasn't used for anything other than turning on that particular voice so you could hear the effects or not, and then processing those using controls to change parts of that effect, or as well as the wet dry, when it's triggering, when it's not triggering, all of that kind of stuff. And you could use that, feeding it back through the filters and then adding filters and reverbs, amplitude envelopes, LFOs, all sorts of things to those signals, right? You could do that. So and I think a lot of other machines have similar topologies where you can start sort of throwing things back round, essentially doing feedback and bringing it back in as a separate feed, which you can then process again. So a lot of that's been available. What I'm really not seeing, and I think possibly the point I was coming to with all of this is, you mentioned gated reverb, Henrik. I think one of the things which I love doing is putting speakers into a room, sending a sound to it from whatever I'm working on, and then having a couple of mics up and playing around with that sound, playing around with the room, or maybe with a lift shaft, which we happen to have in the building, or that kind of thing, where you're playing with different, you're putting mics out of phase deliberately and seeing what you get from that with speakers, stuff being sent out through speakers, with all the degradation. And then there were things like, Peter Frampton did the voice box with, it's the sound through a teeny little speaker coming up a tube, then going into his mic. It was the shittiest sound ever, but it created something very organic, because guess what? It was the mouth articulating it. And I think that's kind of, we're doing that now more and more with these things, with polyphonic aftertouch, MPE. What we're not doing enough of, I think, is the effects side of it, saying, okay, how do we now add an effect which is as analog, which has that articulation, real-time control, that really, really changes it? What do you think?
Yeah, at the minute if you're lucky, you get a way of automating that, either in a sequencer or via something like an LFO or something like that. But yeah, you don't at the minute, you don't really play an effect, do you? You play the keyboard and the effect is on the keyboard. You don't actually play the effect. It's not part of your performance that much. So that might come into it.
But it is possible on some instruments. The patches are just not made, and that's why I would have loved to have Howard on, so we could talk about effects and patches.
Yeah, but what does he know?
Yeah. Everything, possibly.
Yeah.
Well, that's why they have these alternative controllers like the Neova Ring and stuff, where you can add articulation to the various things, including effects, if you can map it, while you're playing with one hand on the keyboard. So, or both hands if.
Kent and I have a project which is to make this, to actually set up an initial patch for making CS80 sounds. And the initial patch, we've had to work really hard to set it up such that the initial patch has the waveforms that are appropriate for the CS80. So the square wave on the CS80 isn't square. It's kind of a 45-degree drop off, right? And the same with the sine wave. The sine waves for they're not like that. They actually have a flattened top almost. So they're a bit more flattened. And so when you start looking at that and say, okay, let's start with that rather than the waveforms that are on here, which are perfect, and then start playing around with the shaping and the pulse width and all of that stuff, distortion, until you get it so it sounds like the original CS. And so we both of us have been sort of playing around with this, and I've got some really good init patches and really good performance init patches which set up for an upper and a lower, and even things like because it's 3 oscillators on this, you can actually route one of the oscillators to go out of the amp rather than going through the filter. So guess what? You assign a flattened sine wave to go straight out into the amp, and you get that classic CS80 sine wave thing, which adds that woof, that bottom end to it all, right? And so we were doing this, and I'm playing it, and he's saying, yeah, that's getting really close, that's getting really close. And then he grabs a handful of knobs on the CS80, which is the real-time controllers, the ring mod, the filter, the brightness, all of those things, resonance, that are all real-time. And all of a sudden it's sounding totally different, right? And it's kind of, oh shit, I thought I was close and I'm not. And it's those kinds of real-time controllers, those articulations, make all the difference, make the CS80 what it is, which is still one of the best instruments ever made. What we're missing at the moment is those kinds of controls. I can put those onto this, by the way, and I'm working on that. But we're missing those kinds of controls for the effects, I think.
Well, that's the thing. That's the great thing about this CS80 is it's powerful and malleable and cool, but it still needs effects, right? By itself, it's still kind of, as Kent has demonstrated and said many times, it cries out for effects. As cool as it is, it's not an island.
But the effects themselves, things like ring mod.
Oh, those on top of it, yeah. But I mean, it needs some delay of reverb to make it more lively,
It does if you're Kent and you're doing Vangelis soundtracks.
Well,
But
that's
it
why
doesn't.
Vangelis did that, So,
But it doesn't all the time. The CS80 is much more flexible than the big reverbs you stick it through. It's still a great instrument without any effects on it, perhaps apart from the chorus or whatever. It's a great synth regardless.
right.
I think the mistake is often as synth heads, we hear a sound and go, okay, that's what it needs. And we hear the sound with the production on it, with the effects, with the EQ, with the compressor. And we try to get close to it with these things. And we go, why doesn't it sound the same? It's because we're not sitting at an API desk with a Lexicon 480 and, a bunch of, LN 1176 limiters on it and whatever else. So, of course, it doesn't sound the same. The bass end doesn't sound the same because we've not got those limiters and that kind of slapback delay on it that gives it that little bit of,
Yeah. Just a little something. Even Eric Persson did a great demo, a live demo with the CS80, and it didn't sound like Vangelis, but it had some effects on it because even he thought it needed it. So
Oh, heck, listen, I had lots of effects on things because I kind of know what I'm going for, and it sounds nice. If I'm playing by myself, the effects allow me to come up with things because they create an ambience and an atmosphere, right? And even no effects do sometimes, but generally, and whether that's piano or otherwise. But I think the temptation to slip straight to those big effects drive you down a particular path and way of playing, and that's kind of okay. Do I really want everything to sound like Vangelis?
Well, and also you can't layer it if it's too busy. So, right.
You can, but then you're doing film music, and there's only so many Hans Zimmers and Vangelises in the world, and Ty Unwins and people in the world, right? So what are you doing it for? And if you're doing it, listen, there's no problem doing it. The Beatles and George Martin were fantastic at using effects. So were Pink Floyd, their engineers at using effects in an appropriate way in tape loops and whatever else, but generally keeping it all down fairly low key, so you weren't aware of great washes of effects until the guitar came in. That lead guitar came in, and then you were kind of, oh yeah, that's the sound.
There were some songs by Beatles where they used the left-right effect, and that was overdone.
But they didn't have. I mean, it was new. It was new.
Yeah.
Stereo was then brand new, and no one knew otherwise. So they were inventing it as they went.
Which makes me wonder, what is the next wide or big effect? Is that mono?
I think it's whatever people need. The hardest thing in the world is to get outside of these things, is to actually turn all the effects off and take these off, switch off the door almost, or at least if you got it running, have things going to the outside. It's interacting with the outside world. It's a bit like with the bass player. When I get a bass player in, there's the amp, bring your effects pedals. The sound you have is your sound. That's what I mean. I'm interested in a sound you already know. It's like when I'm doing video shoots, I employ DOPs, not cameramen, DOPs, because they, generally speaking, understand not just about the camera, but the lights and how the thing should be dressed and the angles. More importantly, much more importantly, they will, generally speaking, have their own kit. And their own kit might be more expensive even than hiring it in, because they've got to get their investment back. But they know it. And actually, the time you spend getting them to use cheaper kit or other kit or your kit it's wasted, because they already know the thing. So if people know this stuff, allow them to do it. And I think what we've lost with all of this, with all of these things, is we're all trying to be everything. And I think getting out and experimenting and finding those weird noises, that what's that all about? Where's that slapback coming? If I put a mic here, I get a really good, that will add something interesting to an echo or to a snare drum or to a vocal. Like what's his name? The Tony Visconti and David Bowie with that the 2-3 mics in a long room, speaker 2-3 mics in a long room, and putting those delays in. They were real. They weren't tape delays or anything else. It was just the distance between the mic and the speakers, and it gave a completely unique sound. That kind of thing we don't do enough of.
Well, that's the advantage. A lot of us that didn't have things growing up and had to scrape and figure things out had that experience. So doing field recordings, using crap stuff with bolt-on effects, and using the spacer in maybe or something like that. Whereas a lot of people working in the box now never do any of that stuff.
And I think it's that challenge, which is having to struggle to get a sound, having a limited palette.
Our old sampler was a pain in the ass to edit. You got to figure it out.
Yeah. So it forces you to get creative.
Yeah.
Go on,
But it has to be done digitally somehow, because there are people who only has headphones, and they can't mic up their headphones. Maybe they can, but
yes, you can.
But you don't get the speaker sound.
That's an effect.
That's a headphone sound.
Yeah,
So-
but it's
So you have to get it as an effect, as a digital effect. You can remake, no matter what equipment you have.
That's another effect that got popular for a while. They call it megaphone effect, where it's like, make my thing sound like this. Inside the effects box.
but it's one
But
of a
it's called,
toolkit.
isn't it called amp effects actually?
Everyone calls it
Radio
something
effect.
different, but it's
Everyone does it differently. Here's the thing. The other thing is, whenever I'm recording, I tend to have a microphone ready the whole time, ready to be armed. So if someone says, "Look, I can hear this drum sound. I want the hi-hat to go," I'll put the mic up and go, "Do it again," and they'll do it. I'll record it, loop it, stick it in the track, and it works. Right? It works. You can just pull it down, do a bit of EQ, and suddenly you've got. It's kind of, why program it? Why would you? The same with bass drums and snares. What about, I want something that goes. Record it. Get rid of the breath, get rid of all that stuff, gate it, compress it, do whatever you have to. But suddenly you've got the kick drum sound because they've heard it and it's very visceral. Yeah. And if you use that in a track, you've got something completely new no one else has done.
This is why I was also enjoying that live thing that Ty Oman talked about at the end of last year on PSN, where it's a field recorder app and you dump it into the thing and it uses some AI for matching transients and stuff. And turning anything into a drum kit or some kind of is a lot of fun. That's
a great piece of software.
Very experimental.
Great piece of software. Very, very good piece of software across all sorts of platforms. So, and it was also really good. There used to be a lot of stuff done once upon a time where people would feed. It's happening again more now with modular, but people would go out of their way to find a way to feed a guitar or a voice or a drum kit into an EMS synthy or into a Moog or into a something and do the filtering on that. And it's kind of, why isn't there more of that being done? Why? Because you can certainly pick up, you can use an envelope follower to pick up a trigger the envelope so that you can have a drum going through a filter and being filtered, properly filtered, or with resonance or comb. You can do all sorts of stuff with it, and it starts taking you into different sonic territory. And I think we're reliant too much on the same reverbs and delays and choruses and flangers and EQ that we've known forever. So you become blind to them, don't you? You kind of go, oh yeah, I'll do some EQ on that at some point.
Presets and templates, isn't it?
Yeah. The thing is, we spend so much time twiddling the knobs for the original sound.
I blame Howard Scar. He makes too many presets. Enough presets. Enough to make our own.
Yeah, bloody Howard Scar. He's to blame.
Good job he's not here, isn't it? Hey?
Yeah, bloody good job he's not here. Or Manny. If only he was in. If only he was in the car listening to us, I'd tell you, Manny. All these bloody presets.
We know where you're driving.
We know where you live. We know which shows you're going to.
So another fun thing about you're talking about taking different approaches and stuff. There's a clever thing that Don Buchla came up with years ago, before he even got to the effects stage, just inputting notes and stuff into the synth. He would use it's a combination of envelope follower and a bunch of other stuff. And he would use a mic in the Buchla system and go like, what kind of stuff, and it would modify all that, turn that into control voltages,
Yeah.
and make really, really weird performances before it even got to weird effects and all of that stuff. So I mean, there's clever like ways of inputting stuff people don't often do either. They just basic keyboard, maybe a theremin once in a while.
So what is an effect? An effect is a way to affect the sound, to sonically change the sound. It could be debated that a filter is an effect.
Sure.
And an amp, an ADSR, an envelope, is an effect. All of these things are effects which allow you to change or modify the sound.
LFO can be an effect. It's making stuff do weird.
Absolutely, it's modulating the wave. So effects are whatever you think of, and I think we're stuck too much with thinking of effects as being just 3 or 4 things, which is essentially dynamics and EQ, delays, time-based, time domain-based stuff, reverbs, reverberant spaces, and then spectral stuff.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Before you came in, yeah.
It's 4 of them. It's 4 of them.
It's
really
pitch, volume, time, EQ, and space stroke reverb.
Yeah, but we're thinking of them all in a digital package that has all those presets which you can tweak a bit. You can make the tail longer or shorter, rather than the whole envelope follower thing, creating a bunch of control voltages, or in my case MIDI controls or whatever, and then applying that to something and going, oh, let's copy and paste that and see what happens.
Would you say oscillators are inherently boring? Because they've done nothing for 40 years.
Depends on the oscillator. Some are boring.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
I know what you mean, but no, because the basic thing by itself, on off, of course that's boring, unless you happen to have a really, really big studio rig where when you press it down you go and your kidneys shake out your bum. But no, I guess basically they are. But as soon as you start playing around in a synth with not just one oscillator but 2, and the shape of the waveform and doing some modulation on it, either
beat off each other.
Yeah, with LFOs or with cross mod, suddenly you're ending up with texturally really rich stuff before you've done a damn thing, right?
But if like on analog synthesizers, you don't even get to pan your oscillator most of the time.
But you can. That's down to you. Where are you hearing it back, and are you panning it on your mixing desk or on?
No. So you've got 2 oscillators. You want to pan one to one side, one to the other. You can on a digital one, but analog ones you can't.
Well,
it's a later thing. You do that later.
But you could if you wanted to, because with analog, especially with modular, you can route it any which way you want.
Yeah, you can have mixers in between
with different world, though, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Modular's a Lego brick assembly line, isn't it? It's not an actual synth.
And also, you can set up performances, so you're only using. I mean, why do you need to use 2 or 3 oscillators in each voice? Why don't you use one oscillator and have it panned one way, and another oscillator in another patch, and then bring them in as a preset where you're blending the 2 together and you're panning them separately and doing separate things with them?
Yeah, there's workarounds, aren't there? Yeah.
But those workarounds are what make things.
Well, they work.
New, but they make it unique as well because no one else is doing it.
Yeah.
It's like what you were saying earlier about you trying to recreate a patch you've heard on a record. I mean, if you go back in the 80s, that patch you're hearing, that bass sound or that pad sound, isn't a synthesizer. It's like 10 synthesizers midied up and then blended together in a mixer. So no wonder you're not going to get that patch on.
Possibly. Sometimes they are, but guess what? You can get king close to it with 1 or 2. You can get close with one big workstation because you can use 2 or 3 different sorts of synthesis and synthesize to try and emulate that. But kind of why? Why not?
If you're a cover band.
If you're a cover band, the audience won't care if it's exact. They're not going to be as anal as you are as a programmer.
Well, you often play in the wrong key too. A lot of people don't play in the right keys.
Yeah. How much of the audience has got perfect pitch, right?
Yeah. Hopefully not many, because perfect pitch is a curse, isn't it? It's not
yeah.
Yeah.
I got to think it's my ADHD. When we're talking oscillators, how would it sound if you took one phase to the left and the other phase to the right? And I know at high notes it wouldn't mean a thing, but at low notes it would probably do something to the sound.
Well, if with low notes, and I've done this, you can do it. You can do it on this. I've done it on this, where you actually have a low frequency note, sine wave or whatever, and you put one out of phase with the other, just simply by changing the phase cycle, and then pan them left and right. Right, and what happens is nothing. You hear left and right. You hear the same.
But you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm only talking about one oscillator, and when it's positive, it's left, and when it's negative, it's right.
Oh, I see.
How will that sound? Yeah.
Well, how would you switch between those two states? Would you have it so that
that could be done modular? When it's positive, it's going to the left channel, and you can just rectify it. So
to the left? Is it transitioning? Is it going?
No, it's transitioning. Yeah.
So in other words, you're talking about an auto pan.
Yeah, an auto.
Yeah.
So that would be fluttering.
But following the frequency of the oscillator.
It would be. It's not undoable.
So
you could certainly do it.
Thinking that you'd sync it to the actual oscillator itself. So it's a division of whatever the oscillator's frequency is.
Yeah. So it wouldn't have much effect at high frequencies, but at low frequencies it would be audible. The basses would be.
You just made yourself some homework.
I'm not. I'm thinking that might be an interesting thing for an LFO to do, by the way, as well, because then you could apply that to that would be a really
but
no one's done that.
The VCO would be the LFO.
No, I get that, but you could use it. Yeah. That's a really interesting. That's a really interesting.
But I don't know if it sounds good. I don't want.
I think it would just be. I don't know. I think it might be annoying.
and you would put a lot of work into it, and nobody would even hear it or know it.
But it's an interesting start to a control technology which you could then apply to think. I'm just thinking that could be a really interesting. If you use that as essentially as a ring mod, as a panning ring mod, or as for FM, so you're affecting different other oscillators. So the positive is affecting one oscillator, and the negative is affecting another. That suddenly opens up a whole bunch of sonic possibilities that would be really quite interesting.
You could mix it up with the Bernoulli gate or something, have it do some weird switching.
Yeah. That's a really good idea, Henrik.
Do it.
I have thousands of those. I just forget them again.
Yeah. I'm just thinking how it would sound. I'm not sure it would be that pleasant to sound necessarily, but it might be something that could be madly, wonderfully.
It'd probably
weird.
be quite cinematic, wouldn't it? As a rumble hum type thing that's going around you.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, even more than left and right, you can do forward and backward and top and bottom.
That's your next video, Henrik. Just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do we got here?
Are you making a patch like that?
Well, I'm just. So that is let's just start from scratch. So that's just a standard, that's just a standard sine wave. But actually it's a slightly flattened sine wave, like the CS80. So if I unflatten it, you can hear the difference, right?
Flatter's harsher.
So once you start smoothing it out, or rather flattening it, it is slightly harsher, but more importantly, it adds more to the bottom end. Again, if I you can still hear it, but it's nothing like as present as that. So taking that even there, that's probably at what, 100 hertz or something like that. It's about 110 or something. So if that was doing modulation across, you'd be getting 110 of those. In fact, you wouldn't. You'd be getting 220 because it's going upper and lower. So a complete cycle is 1, 2. So you'd be getting a pan across 110 times, a full spectrum pan, for instance.
Yeah.
110 times, and that's going to be you're probably not going to pick it up.
But then you could use that. You could halve that frequency, or make a quarter of it. You could still work with the same basic node and double or half it or whatever you want to do.
With a different waveform. Hang on a moment, let's just get rid of that. So if we go to a sawtooth, if we take this down, this is 8 foot, 16 feet, you can hear the individual bits. 32. Sounds like a Harley just popping along the street. So
it's like an old Casio motorcycle preset or something.
but it's still happening almost too fast to make audio sense. But as a controller, maybe it would do something. Especially, I mean, if you use lag processors and all the other stuff that you have available, that could be kind of interesting, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's a modified sawtooth, so that's not the standard sawtooth. So the sawtooth on this. That's more like the CS one. And if you play the pulse width, because I can see the waveform here, so you can. I should show you this. Let me try this. Actually, let's go to oscillator 1. View. Where's view?
Do you have your set for video out? Your keyboard?
Yeah, I can do. So what I can do is switch this on and change my camera. Not sure if you'll be able to see this, but we'll give it a go. Settings.
Else you could just join by your phone another session on StreamYard.
I could. Oh, it would help if I actually had it plugged in, wouldn't it? Right, let's try it with my phone. Copy.
Andy, you could sing a song meanwhile.
Here we go.
If I were a rich man.
So if I turn off this mic on here, hang on a moment. So we do that, and then there we go. Right, now let's just turn this around somehow. How the hell do I turn it around in here?
Also, while we're here, any questions from chat? Put a Q in the chat and we'll see if we can pick them up.
Settings, camera. There we go. Right. So here you see this little square here. So if I press this, hang on, where are we? Right. Now if I come back to here and we have a look at the pulse width, let me try just leaving this. Right, so what we're after is that's more of the, so in fact actually it's back to front, but if we switch to so you can see I'm able to distort. And there you can see we've gone from a square wave to one which has got the 45, a slope coming down on it, right? So that is the CS80 square wave. And that's it, really. So you can make massive changes to these things. Just sonically, just with the shape of the oscillator, the pulse width, the any number of things before you've done a damn thing, and that makes a huge difference once you start blending oscillators together. Even if they're exactly in tune, you start blending them together and get a bit of that different wave shapes all blended together at 8 foot and 16 and whatever, 4 or whatever you want to do with different waveforms to start with. You end up with a really rich, oddly pure and rich sound both at the same time, especially in the bottom end. And then you slap a compressor across it. Woohoo! Where you go. But preferably an analog one, but whatever.
Interesting. By the way, it's not about effects. Does a new montage and ModiX support video out like the old one did? The old one was only USB 2, but
I don't know if it's. I don't know. Is the answer. I can bring, because the M8X has, and the M8, or sorry, the MX series has a USB which goes to your DAW, and you can bring up a plugin from Yamaha which replicates what's going on here. Actually, this is the new version, so the first version doesn't replicate everything, and we're waiting for an update so it does the whole 9 yards. So it's only showing parts of the synth, as it were.
So that's
not
HDMI
live.
connection you have?
Sorry?
HDMI used right now for the connection?
No, it's USB-C.
Oh,
So
it is
it's actually it's just replicating what's in here. It's not using video at all. It's using a plugin, and it's duplicating the control surface. I don't know if you can actually have you probably can. I've not tried it. If you can have video out of this, if you can, I suppose the issue is which of the displays are you talking about? Because there's two on here, right? Hang on, I didn't show you that bit. Let's try this again. So
Andy, you can sing meanwhile.
I want to hear some Danish singing. You're very good at that.
Oh, no.
People are clamoring for more.
Beautiful.
Yeah, maybe coughing if you want. I cough all the time. Not in tune though. Need auto pitch.
So here, I showed you this screen, but actually there's this whole thing here. So the entire control surface is here. This one tells you, if I can get it in focus, so this one tells you can switch between program and arpeggio and individual preset. And with the individual preset, as you can see, we've got oscillator 1, 2, 3, then pitch, then
it's impossible. It's difficult to see. Perhaps if you switch on some light in the room, so the display gets darker.
Okay, hang on. Hold on.
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, a little bit.
better,
Not
yeah.
much, but a little.
Well, but you can see we have, on each of these things. So amplitude, you've got part, LFO.
If you get closer, it should auto adjust, I would hope.
Let me just have a look. Yeah. I think what I'll do, guys, I'm going to stop this now because it's not really working. So what I'll do, I'll set up another specific camera, which I had ready. But at the moment, my box for plugging it in, I took on a shoot with me, and I haven't put it back into the computer yet. So I'll do that for the next time. But let me just take this off. It's better.
How does he do that?
Yeah, incredible.
Hello. I am from Welsh Wales.
Okay, back to the effects. Where? You were talking about something earlier. What was it? While you were looking something up, Andrew.
I was?
Yeah.
About which thing?
Yeah. It was a device that Andrew was looking up.
You're talking about the Eurorack E520.
Oh, the Hyperion processor.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at it, and it's kind of interesting, but I'm not, it looks good, but there's nothing there that I've not seen before in other forms. It's just it's allowing you to jump into. I mean, there's a couple of things that look slightly.
The algorithms are the unique thing. There's several unique ones in there that are, or he's named them uniquely. So I never tried all the algorithms.
Okay, let me present. In fact, let me do it.
But it's just one example. There's several manufacturers, 4MS, and a bunch of other guys really thinking outside the box for bizarre effects. And everything is CVable, so you have complete control over it.
But that's the trick, isn't it? It's that CVable thing. Let me just pop this over here. Get rid of that and bring this up full screen.
So you either do it with CV or you do it with step control, like in Electron stuff. Those are the two main major control schemes out there.
There you go. There. So I'll just bring that up a bit more. So what we have here is, this is the box, which looks, pretty much like I'd expect it to. I like the left fork, right fork CV thing, and left fork, right fork.
It's all designed around stereo. If you wanted, you don't have to use stereo. It's really nice.
Okay, so you can use the signal, which is driving the left or the right part of it, as forks for additional processing or as controls, which seems pretty good. So let's have a look at the effects. So here we go, time domain effects, stereo pattern delay. Each channel, left and right, has its own separate delay line with 2 sets of taps, primary and secondary. Okay, that's you can. That's already sort of been done. I certainly have that on the EX, on the EMU, where you've got 16 taps and you can route them left, right, and
Well,
have them.
I think the EMU is like the gold standard. No one's really going that crazy.
But but it's interesting that they're talking about being able to add 2 taps on 2 CV controlled taps on each of the legs, so you can use it as stereo or as 2 separate, or
Yeah.
however. Stereo flanging delay, yeah, well, yeah. Stereo chorus, resampling mini delay. So is this real time, the resampling mini delay? Do you know?
As far as I remember, it was. Yeah. Again,
Okay,
I haven't
don't
used it
want
for
to-
at least 6 months, maybe a year. Just other stuff came up, but it is a cool unit. I actually helped them beta test a little bit, and it was fun.
Okay, so I'd like to understand what that's about, but you can put band limiting on. There are bit crunching and various other. I'm not quite sure exactly what it's doing, but I'd like to hear that. Stereo clean delay. Don't think there's anything. Stereo resampling delay. Place delay line length for granular crossfade effects. Sample rates, FM. That looks interesting.
Yeah.
That does look interesting. Prime dual tap delay.
I should have
So,
plugged
okay,
it in.
yeah.
I didn't think about having it ready to go, but I should have plugged it in for this thing.
Lexicon Primetime T93. Again, I've seen that before. So stereo reversing delay. There's not many of those. There are others that are doing this. You can certainly get stereo reversing delays as plugins, but having this all in one box is pretty good. Deflector shield. Recreation, what's that? Monophonic effect similar to the original Bode frequency shift.
Yeah, see, there's weird stuff in there. It's pretty cool.
But it's not new. The Bode
Not
frequency.
new, but until Defra came out with that one recently, it wasn't
True
a common effect.
quadrature outputs. Now so it's doing some things. It's adding some features. The effect itself isn't new, but the way they're using it is. That's interesting. And here's the thing: this deflector shield. So it's a Bode frequency shift. If that was on one of these keyboards, would anyone be using it? Would they just go, no idea?
Yeah.
I want reverb. I want delay. So stereo frequency shifter. Okay, it's true. 24-stage phaser. Yeah. Stereo pitch shifter. Variable grain size and chaos effect. That sounds like it could be interesting. So this is a reverb combined with a granular pitch shifter rather than just pitch shifting and chorusing. Want to hear that as well? Stereo looper, been there, done that. All spectral effects use 1024 point complex FFT to supply. Yeah, okay. 2.7 milliseconds. Yeah, that's enough. Voda speech filter bank.
That's pretty cool. The old voter.
Well,
That's actually a plugin on the Ensoniq EPS 16 Plus. There's a voter plugin you can get for that.
yeah, you got that on the EMU, and you've got a vocoder, but not Voda. I've not had a look at the vocoder on this. Some give you a lot more flexibility about how you're using it, whether or not you're using one bank or you're actually stacking them together to give you, 12, 24, 36, 48 bands. Spectral crusher. Okay, does it in a different way. So I'd like to hear what that is. Spectral time machine, looper, pitch shifter, and time stretcher. Well, there's nothing new there, but maybe the way they're doing it is interesting. Some settings of the phase play. Okay. Pitch shifter, spectral delay, variable band. Yeah. So, Spectral Drone Maker. Michael Norris Spectral Drone Maker plugin. Takes any audio as input, samples the sounds at controllable intervals and interpolates between the samples. Controllable intervals and interpolates between the samples. So this is again doing sort of granular, I guess.
Yeah, so it's recreating some famous stuff. It's got a few spins on some stuff and a few fairly novel things in there as well. So it's a cool combination of stuff.
Okay, so I'm only seeing one or two things in here that are different-ish, but what I am seeing is a lot of them all in one box. I think I might have to investigate this, even though I don't have modular. I think I might have to.
You know, you can leave it. You can get it in a little box. Put a Pod 64 case or whatever, and it's power supply, and that's it. You don't have to add anything to it.
I'd like to be able to control it via MIDI rather than CV.
I don't know. I thought I had some MIDI on it, but I can't remember. Well, Goo has it too. He might know. But I don't remember the MIDI part.
Well, the thing is, you can get MIDI to CV and vice versa.
Yeah, you converted already. So I have converters for all that stuff already.
Okay. Well, interesting. Okay.
But that's one example of, some clever stuff.
There's some clever stuff, but there are quite a few effects out there that are doing some clever stuff, amp sims and modulation. There's a lot of stuff going on in the guitar pedal, effects market as well.
True, but they're usually mono, right?
Yeah. Well, no. There's a lot that are doing stereo as well.
Now they're doing stereo because they want to have a wider market, but
yeah. So the talk, the subject, which is synthesis, effects in synthesizers or in synthesis. What? I don't think I've changed my mind too much. It's handy to have. It's nice to have. It's very flattering to have. But I tend to get a lot more creative when I'm not using the onboard effects and I'm doing something else with them. And I tend to get even more creative because I've got time vested when I send it out into the real world with mics and speakers and God knows what else.
Is that your words of wisdom effect then?
Well, no, it works for me.
Anecdotal, yeah.
It works for me. Each of us finds a different path to create uniqueness, right? That's the beautiful thing about music. And the wonderful thing about synthesis is it's an infinitely variable set of parameters that we can each use. And even if we use the same preset, each of us will play it differently. So it's just another way of using these things we have, these toys we have, these tools, and making them into instruments. So I certainly encourage people to try it, but not everyone's got microphones or studios or spare speakers or a setup where it's easy for them to do something like that.
Yeah, most people probably don't.
But even with headphones, microphone, even that fed back into a door, feeding out from the door into the headphones, into this, straight into the door, that gives you a different effect. It gives you something you haven't had before. Just that is it's a different thing. You can try playing around with, different stereo things for phase and putting it on your mouth. Wah, wah. All of that is different. And if you've got a mic and a pair of headphones or speakers and any kind of audio interface and a DAW, then all of that's available to you.
I'd say my takeaway would be A/B stuff. Learn to also turn off your effects as well as turn them on.
Oh God!
See if the thing you're doing is actually helping what you're trying to do or making it worse.
And I think
when I'm running on my MPC, if I've got a synth sound on, you usually got inbuilt effects, but you can also put 4 insert effects. So I'll try ideas out. So you put things on, go, oh, that's cool. Then you add that and you add that. I think, hang on, if I take that third thing off, oh, that's better, right? So I think you can easily go down a big rabbit hole just putting loads and loads and loads and loads of effects on and absolutely ruining the thing you're trying to do. So sometimes it's good just to step back and just go, right, off. Did it really help? And if it did, then or if it did but it was too much, then just dial it back a bit.
One of the great limitations of my Machina Plus, because the CPU only has so much horsepower unless you use it with a computer, is you can't put effects on everything because it'll just choke. You see the CPU go crazy. So it forces you to be sparse, add the effects you need, take effects off stuff you don't need, put them on a bus instead of a single instance.
Yeah.
And just think differently. And it's a lot of fun. You learn a lot of stuff.
Or print the effects, turn the effects off, and live with the result.
Yeah.
That's
In a
what.
DAW,
That's
you
what
make a decision. Yeah,
exactly that. Make a decision.
Yeah,
make a decision. Sometimes I've often sort of found myself smiling because I used to do this as well. If you're in a studio and someone's doing a bass, particularly a bass synth, right, and you can see, or a bass guitar or a bass drum, kick drum, and you can see them wanting to make it more boof, more give it more grunt in the bottom end, and they'll start off by dialing in all this EQ at the bottom end, and the thing's sounding horrible, and the speakers are flapping, and you're getting distortion and all sorts of things. You go, well, that doesn't sound like I wanted it to, particularly with bass synths. And then they'll start putting dimension Ds on it, and other choruses and flangers and octaviders on, and it's still not sounding how they want it to. And you kind of just listen, just put a compressor on it. Put a really good compressor on it and just squeeze. Then you can take it down in the mix a bit, because you're essentially pulling up the lower, pulling up the lower volume parts of the frequency spectrum and pulling down the higher frequency, and you're bringing it all together. Then you can place it in the mix, and doing that, compressing it adds so much more weight, and an awful lot of the really classic sounds we hear are just where they've compressed. I mean, everyone says, it's where you've got 10 or 12 synths linked together. Not always. Usually 2, possibly 3, but it's compressed to buggery, because compression just gives it that rich, silky thing.
Also, in the days where we had records, you couldn't make your bass drum kick. Because if you did, your needle would jump out of the groove and you'd have your thing just skating across the top. Now we can do whatever we want. Now we can do the brick wall limiting, crushed to death, horrible waveform mix. It looks like a big square.
Well,
you can do that.
The truth is, you could do a lot more with the bass end than people sort of realise with particularly vinyl.
Yeah, a 12-inch
with vinyl, but as long as you sum to mono below 160 hertz, and you set, it's kind of, because what you hear the brrr of a bass, for which you need a big system, right? And if you're playing it in a club system, then generally speaking, the styluses will be a little heavier than you would normally find in a lot of hi-fi buffs homes, because guess what? With all that stuff rattling around, the needles will jump out anyway, and you don't want that. So they tend to be a little heavier, right? So you can afford to add a little more in there, but also you can add a bit more an octave above. You can just feed in an octave above whatever your fundamental bass frequency is. You can put the harmonics in just a little, and it really adds oomph to the whole thing, because you tend to feel the bass rather than hear it. It's certainly in that kind of a setting.
Yeah.
And also, then that was about the technology of how you cut records, and that was another thing that was. I used to send my 12 inches over to Bob, and I can't remember his second name, in LA, who had a Neumann lathe, and he would. I'd send it over at half. So I send over a half-speed, half-inch tape, and it would be backwards, so that he could cut the thing backwards from the center coming out. Because guess what? With a big heavy lathe and really energetic transients for the bass end, it's much harder for a lathe to spin up from nothing to that and then diminish. Whereas if you cut backwards, those waveforms go and then stop.
Yeah.
Decelerating is hugely easier than it is to accelerate, and getting that right gives you the crispest transients and the best bottom end you've ever heard in your life off of vinyl. Half speed, cutting at half speed and backwards. It was sexy as hell when you played it in a club. And it did pop a few needles out of the grooves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway. Yeah.
Well, Steve, you have a list. Are we through it yet, or?
Oh God. We haven't talked about distortion, really, have we? As an effect.
No?
No.
No.
Distortion,
A little bit of
overdrive,
overdriving. and,
pressure, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
They seem to be like in vogue now, don't they? In for synthesizers and stuff. Seems to be a thing to do.
for pretty much everything.
We did talk briefly about on some systems where it's at 12 is the clean one. As you turn up, it overdrives the audio, so you get a little bit of that overdrive distortion on that. That's kind of clever on some gear, so you can add a little punch to your stuff.
But it's about what distortion are you talking about? Even
Exactly,
harmonic, odd harmonic, a mix of those. And is it clipping or is it rounding off? Is it compressing down? Distortion, especially valve distortion, can be a wonderful thing, but so can transistor distortion. And emulations of that are amazing. But it's kind of like with most of these things, where and when you use it really depends on having an idea or having a sound that works contiguously throughout. There are some songs out there that have distortion all the way through that are amazing. And there are others where you just go, for God's sakes, turn the distortion. Just let me hear it, but that's the same with any effect. Too much reverb, too much delay.
It's nice when you build to it and then take it away and not leave it on the whole time. Yeah.
That's the other thing about the word effect is to know it's an effect, really you need to also hear stuff without an effect. Otherwise, everything's affected. You need contrast, don't you? I think the most successful effects used are when you notice that they're being used well. And to notice they're being used well, you need to know that the other things you're hearing don't have an effect. And then when this thing comes in, you actually hear the difference.
I think I'd probably, for us, yes, but for the great unwashed out there, the most successful effects are the ones where they don't notice it; they just know that it sounds wonderful. So, like when Trevor Horn was doing all of his remixes in the 80s, the use of lexicons and delays and all of that kind of stuff, it was extreme and extraordinary. But he would drop it out and drop it in. People didn't know they were effects. They just knew that it felt good. And he judged when to use it and when not. And I suppose probably the most significant thing in terms of musical education that's happened to the great unwashed and all of us, I guess, to an extent, is with dance music, with the drop. The drop where you have stuff going on, and then it suddenly drops down and you have this little thing building up. So you get to both pause and go, wow, you get that break, and then you get the build, or you get a bang back in or whatever, but it makes you, the light and dark, the dynamic of that makes the thing work so much better because you're hearing individual bits. Same with effects.
You need contrast in a musical piece, otherwise it just becomes, I've seen stuff, when you're looking at stuff on SoundCloud, it gives you a waveform of the thing you're about to listen to. And you some of the things you're looking at thinking, yeah, okay, so it's basically the same thing for the next 5 minutes. Yeah, it just gets boring. It's like
there's no need to call Steve a giant sausage. Did you hear that, Steve?
Well.
A small chipolata maybe, but not a giant sausage.
It's kind of like comparing beauty makeup to makeup effects, right? Beauty makeup, you're not supposed to notice the makeup at all if it's done well. It just enhances the look. Makeup effects is like monsters and scars, all kinds of stuff for effect that's all in your face. And it just depends on what style you want to do, you know?
How do you know about my makeup?
I've been studying. I see Shiseido in the background there.
Oh, yeah.
You had the lights on before.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So distortion, and use of effects and or not. So, I mean, here's the thing. I prefer music with dynamic, but some tracks wouldn't work if you had it in there. Ace of Spades, Motorhead wouldn't work with a drop. It's full on from the beginning to the end, and that's exactly that's the energy and that's the brilliance of that particular piece.
Yeah, but Ace of Spades is a it's not a 15-minute song, is it? It's like
Exactly.
a 3-minute song. It's like 3 minutes of Hell for Leather heavy metal is like, wow, that was amazing. But actually it does have a drop because it stops. That's the drop. And you go, God, that was amazing. So
you're right. It does. You're right. It does.
Plus, the singing style is not subtle, so it might as well have everything else crazy in the track, right? So.
I love that you call it not subtle. That's a great descriptor.
Yeah,
it's definitely not subtle. Yeah, it's memorable though, isn't it? It's
he's great. Yeah, and
again,
the way he sings at the mic is down, and he's screaming up at the mic.
Yeah, I would imagine you could describe the whole band as an effect. Really, Motorhead as a band is an effect. They have this whole thing, the whole look, sound, everything is an effect. So yeah, it's interesting stuff.
And a lot of people have tried to copy that kind of sound, and some with less success than others. I do find some metal to be just really ill-considered and not terribly interesting. Because it's doing all the stuff. It's got the hallmarks of other pieces.
It's templated, isn't it? They've found a template that works, and just that's it. They're doing that,
and that's it, rather than actually doing something creative. But the same thing goes for pop songs, jazz, prog rock, synth. Lots of people do that. Oh, that was successful. I'll copy that, rather than finding their own path and doing their own thing. But that's a whole other conversation, isn't it, Henrik?
Yes, it's not synthesizers. But the thing you said about metal, to me, it's all metal, which is not interesting to me. But that's just me. I'm just saying.
I grew up on metal. I was a kid listening to hard rock and metal and stuff, so I can appreciate it. I don't listen to it much anymore, but I can appreciate it. So.
I've seen Motorhead. They were very, very loud.
Really. Well, bands like Metallica, who did some extraordinary, still do some extraordinary stuff. I remember seeing them with the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. That was a stunning concert, and I thought, when I heard about it, I thought that will never ever work. It's just going to be so shit. I can't tell you. And then when I watched it, I went, oh my God, that's absolutely brilliant. They pitched it just right.
Again, it's like any effect. It's knowing how to apply it. If you apply it well, then it's done well.
Yeah, but Metallica, they have albums mastered so loud, so there are actually no dynamics.
So, yeah, I know. I hate that sort of stuff.
Well, that was Michael Kamen orchestrated that. I think that was good stuff.
It was good stuff. It was, yeah.
Peace.
I always think Massive Attack are masters of effects usage. Simon, you're absolutely right, mate. Absolutely right. They understand where and how to use it, and also the ambiences they have. They're very clever. Massive Attack in having little ambient things, little scratches and things, little textures playing behind stuff that just add to the tension or to the tenderness or whatever it is of each of the tracks they're doing. I think they're brilliant.
And strong bass doesn't ruin the rest of it too.
No, well, they know how to place it. Yeah. Very, very clever band. They are still just an amazing influence. They were a huge influence on me.
I guess they sort of orchestrate their songs like you would have in a proper orchestral type thing. You'd build things up and drop things out, so and to make things interesting.
I think they just listened. I think that I know what you mean. They do use orchestration, but I think they just listen, and I think they just that was another texture and another thing that they could use to draw a track through. So I just think they keep their ears wide open. They're very
Can you call a texture an effect? You can, but it's an additional instrument kind of. It's not an effect on a synthesizer.
There as a supporting of your song of cast of the players, and it's filling a gap.
Well,
it's like a big multi effect.
Yeah. So in radio, TV, film, there is a whole track called sound effects and another one called ambience, right? And the ambience is usually, but if you're recording outside, it's having cars and things going by, or street noise, or birds tweeting, or all that. And then effects are all the others, the footsteps, the gunshots, the horns, all the Foley stuff. Those Massive Attack, along with a few others, are really, really good at incorporating that into their tracks. So they're using those effects. I like to do that as well. You're using ambiences and sound effects as part of the overall composition to just add that little bit of extra, and sometimes incredibly subtle. And again, the Beatles did that. So did Pink Floyd. I mean, I'm referencing those so much just because I'm familiar with the works, and they did it almost. Them Pet Shop Boys. Not Pet Shop Boys, Beach Boys, Pet Shop Boys, what a twat. But they using those textures to create an atmosphere over which a track is described, over which a piece of music is described, and it sets the scene. And I think that's, or punctuates certain bits. Yeah. I think that's brilliantly clever.
Yeah, Joy Division did that as well, didn't they, on their albums? As a way of going from one track to another track.
Yeah.
To say that track's finished, we're going to take you on a different journey now, and they start it off with
Pink Floyd in concert even had like surround sound stuff in intermission that was so stunning. Like, holy shit, this is amazing in this concert.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Nothing was afterthought to them. They thought about everything. So
yeah. I saw. God no, I don't even. I'll tell you how old I am. I saw them when they did "Wish You Were Here" at Nebworth. When they first did that, they debuted the album at Nebworth, and they had a plane coming down through the crowd doing. I can't remember, it was off of Dark Side, but it was that was very weird. And then I saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer with the quadraphonic thing at Wembley Empire Hall, doing brain salad surgery when I was 14 with the quadraphonic sequencing. And that was just wow. And everyone went out and bought 8-track cassettes for their Austin Maxes, their shitty cars, put these 8 tracks in so they could get this quadraphonic effect. Yeah. And you could never really get it in the car. One person would have one speaker blaring out. Only the driver would hear the whole thing, but everyone else would get a really terrible experience of the sound. Yeah.
I remember some old car stereos had a joystick on them you could actually place. You could use to place the audio in your car. So,
yeah.
Do you think that we're going to move on from stereo at any point? Because we've got all this. We've had quadraphonic in the 70s. We've had this. What's it called? Dolby Atmos. We've got that.
Yeah. Quad is coming back too. A lot of modular guys are making quad stuff again. So.
Yeah, no, but will it ever become a thing? Will it? I mean, stereo replaced mono. So mono is gone as a format. Stereo.
What you're asking, I think, what you're asking is, will it become more mainstream? Because essentially, surround sound or environmental, or not environmental. Oh God! I used to use not binaural. I still use ambisonic. Ambisonic mixes have been around for a very long time, and ambisonic allows you to record in 360, up, down, left, right, forward, backwards, and you can play back on ambisonic systems. And Roland bought out a system called the RSS back in the 90s.
Yeah,
that
pretty cool.
That
surprised that he hasn't got one.
gives you a 3D experience of sound from stereo speakers.
Yeah.
The thing is, for most people, unless you're a real enthusiast, for most people, even when they get their TVs and there's decoders for their films where they have to put up the 6 or 7 speakers, almost no one I know has ever set them up properly. They have the speakers there and they're making sound. They're kind of, oh, there's a voice coming from over there.
And not calibrated, yeah.
Because guess what? We used to live with AM radio, mono AM radio, and still find it groovy. We still listened to the music. And then FM came along. We went, wow, that's amazing at 15 kilohertz or whatever it was, top sample thing. And then CDs and so on and so forth, all of which were stereo. We've become people who are listening using these things, either buds or headphones. Yeah. And there's only 2 holes going in. The differences are about the way the information is presented, the phase on the different frequencies. So you can simulate enormous 3D spaces through these, but you need you have to assume the person that's hearing it has got perfect hearing or the same hearing in both ears. Because if they haven't, then it will shift whatever the image is. It will distort it massively. Yeah. And doesn't have any hearing damage at 4K if they've been shooting things or if they've been playing in a band without wearing any earphones, then they're going to have huge damage at 4K, a big dip at 4K. And then as you age, you're going to have to... So the answer is, it's already there. There are people already doing these things for headphones, etc., but the results are variable. And if you can actually add depth to a stereo recording anyway. You can add depth through all sorts of fairly simple, easy processes to give you that kind of soundstage, forwards, backwards, left, right, and a bit of up, down. And people are used to that, and it's a really easy way to listen to music. We're used to that, and you can pretty much guarantee as an engineer or as a producer or as a musician that if you record for stereo and just make sure it's really clean, that is to say, not clean, you can be distorted as you like, but the actual process is really clean, then why would people want anything more than that? You can already get it, but it's not become a big thing. And maybe it will, but not just yet. And I can't see why it would, because it's a bit like you don't see everyone walking around now with headsets, with VR headsets.
No,
because it's limited to those who, if you've got glasses, you've got to get special lenses made. You have to have a special place where you're safe. There is only so much connectivity and so much you can do with it before it becomes intrusive. It becomes, blah, 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 blah. There's all sorts of reasons why not.
Also, your eyes and ears get all sweaty.
Eventually that will be there. And in fact, I do 3D audio for VR. We do that already. So we can place things in, attach something to a dog barking over here, so it grabs your attention. You turn your head, a helicopter coming from over here. What the?
Well, Electric Image had that back in 1990. The EIS had positional audio. You could actually move a thing around in it.
We were doing that in 1992. I was a partner in the world's first VR studio called Virtual S, based in Barnes in London. And for a year we earned virtual money. But it was an interesting thing, right? So being able to do this stuff is not really the issue. Being able to set it up so that people can hear what you intended is way harder for surround, for ambisonic mixes than it is for just stereo. And most people are really happy with stereo. Does that answer your question, kind of?
Yeah, well, we do have 2 ears. I suppose you need to grow more ears to appreciate it. But I think that those sort of things are a bit like 3D TV was, or 3D in the cinema. It's a thing that's a fad that comes and goes. We had 3D cinema in the 1950s, and then we had it back again.
And there's some things for which, if you are brought to the right environment and you can then show it like an IMAX film, then go and do it, and you can craft something, a special something like, for instance, Avatar, which was, in my opinion, of the modern era, the only really good 3D.
Because Avatar focused on the depth, not the gimmick coming out at you.
Yeah, that's right, just depth.
Yeah.
So ashes were falling all around you, kind of.
So
wow.
much stuff, and not a thing in your face, like.
Yeah. So and that was very clever.
Not the pointy stick in your face. Yeah,
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter that nothing very much has been successful since, because the technology is now there, and it can be done again when there's an appropriate thing to do it with. No one's thought of anything particularly appropriate to do it with so far.
Okay.
I have a feeling it's going to start happening because of what's happening with video games.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another topic, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I mean, I remember going down to Ministry of Sound when they launched their big surround system. I was at the launch. In fact, it was one of my first dates with my wife. I took her to this. She thought I was such a god because I took her to Ministry of Sound launch, and it was really good, really, really, really good. But when you've had a few drinks or some other substances and you're in a crowded room with lots of people dancing to a really big track, it mattered not a freaking jot. It really didn't make any difference at all.
Well, that's the nature of an effect. It has an impact, and then it's impacted. It's done.
Yeah.
So if on the first few things that you heard at that thing, you'll go, "Oh, that's amazing." And like you say, 2 minutes in, you've got used to it. It's banal and boring, and just do I like the track or not?
No, more to the point, with lots and lots of people in when you're dancing and you're changing your orientation, you're used to the sound being there, right? So you're dancing and turning, you're used to orienting yourself by the sound. So if the sound's everywhere, your orientation kind of goes, and it gets a bit muddy. I mean, it doesn't get muddy, but it's not as focused an experience as a club experience. It's good to show off. It's a bit like the demo presets on these things. You will get some demo presets where you go, wow, and you will never use it in a track because it's just too domineering, right?
That's how I thought. The Wave, when I was in a shop listening to all the patches on the Wave station in the 90s, I thought, that's amazing. Wow, that's amazing. God, that's amazing. And I thought, I'd never use this in a track though. It's a great preset, but where the F am I going to use it? Because it'll just sound like I'm using the preset. What's the point?
Yeah, but I did. I used it on a few. I used those.
Yeah.
But you're right. But it is that thing of, it's kind of, yes, you can do it, and yes, it's impressive. But do you want that all the time? Do you want that effect and all the wavetables doing this and all the effects on all the time? And the answer is no. You want the light and shade. You want to know it's there to be able to do it with, but choose the right moment. And for Ministry of Sound, that whole 3D system thing, it worked better. Honestly, it worked better as a stereo.
It's a bit like you're doing a painting and you've got a favourite colour that's like, I don't know, bright purple. It's like you can use little bits of bright purple in your painting that you make, and you've got a nice painting. You really don't want to just paint the whole canvas bright purple, though, do you? Because it's going to be not any good.
Unless it's called bright purple.
Well, yeah, then $400,000 sold. But
really?
Yeah,
Where's my paint? Where's my paint?
Keep going on about it, but you need to do a contrast of effects and different things. Otherwise, it just ends up being the same thing all the way through. You haven't got any difference.
With all of these things, yes, contrast does. It's knowing your toolkit. You wouldn't build a garden shed with one set of screws or one set of nails, probably.
No,
because you've got different wood and you've got different things to be fitted to it. You've got felt to put on. You might want to use, so you don't use the same tool for everything, right? You get, so learning the tools that you have, and those tools then, once you've got them for that garden shed and you use them, they probably wouldn't be any use for repairing a chimney stack or laying down a new gravel pathway or so. So the tools, you just get to know the tools and they're there when you need them. I think the trick is to say, when I need them. I need them.
Yeah. What do you think, Henry?
Contrast is a thing we. Yeah, all life is about contrast. Acting, it's just not about acting. It's also about having breaks in the acting, which makes it good. You can't have everything at the same time. It won't work. And the same with live. You won't feel ups if you don't have downs. You have to have it both.
Man has just come on and said, did I hear something about the montage's ability to modulate the effects parameters? I was saying something about the EMU, the RFX being able to modulate its parameters. I've not really explored. I know I can turn on and route to and from the effects on the montage, but I've not really explored the effects parameters on that, and I don't know whether or not you can change them yet. But if you've got any more information on that, Manny, it'd be lovely to hear from you. Not right now. Here you go. That's for you. That's for you, Manny.
Wow.
There we go. That's my masterpiece. No contrast.
Doesn't need effects. It's great.
As a user of polyphonic aftertouch, we have a user on here that's using it. He's wearing a red jumper at the minute. What do you think of that? Are you... Because I watched Kent the other day and he was talking about his Osmos and how he's turned down the sensitivity on a lot of it because it was just too much. How are you finding your interaction with the polyphonic aftertouch on?
Well, with all the aftertouch on here and on most of these things, you can actually change the
curve.
Response and the curve, and I'm actually finding it really good. The only downside I have with the keyboard on this is the
trills are a bit slow. Yeah.
You can't really. It doesn't bounce back fast enough to give you the trills, and that's a real pain in the bum. That to one side, being as I don't play that much Rachmaninoff off these days, that to one side, I love it. It works. In fact, I'm just gonna let me see.
But that adds another. I mean, that's also an effect on how you play.
It is. I mean, look at these great big lumps of meat. So I'm not going to have a
you
huge
could be the
problem
king
with
of England. You know what I mean? You got sausage fingers.
King of England. To the tower, off with his head. So let me just see if I can. Where are we?
So I haven't dialed down the Osmos because I got used to it. But if you don't pay attention, you will spread.
Yeah.
I got Rolly and Osmos and all that shit. Yeah. So it's great stuff.
How do you get on with them? You find them? How do you find them?
I mean, it is like Rich Hilton and everyone else will say, it is an instrument you have to put the time in to learn because it is easy because of all the extra expression. Unless you dial it down, it is easy to, when you're doing a chord, to get spread by accident because you're not thinking about it. And on a normal keyboard, it doesn't matter. But on an Osmos or on a C-board, it matters greatly. You're going to get all those tower notes and stuff.
Do you find most of the presets are doing a similar thing? But for you doing the pressure and moving your fingers and things, are they? Can you sort of second guess where you develop a new preset? Do you need to play the preset before you know how to play the preset? If you know what I mean? How it responds?
I always do anyway, just because I'm curious what it does. What am I? It's like, how far can I go in this direction, that direction, whatever. Just because, especially if I'm going to build up something on a looper or something like that, I need to know what sounds are going to work together. Right. And while I'm there, like, what else can I do without having to? I can use a foot pedal instead of touching the slider, so both hands can stay on the keys.
I mean, with the left to right thing, could you make that do panning as well? Could you be the auto pan up per note if you wanted to do that?
I'm pretty sure, but I haven't gone into those settings much yet.
Thank you, Manny. By the way, that's good to hear. I'll explore. I'm still just finishing off the CS80 init patches and performances, so that we can stay. I'm going to be sharing those out so that people have a default template to start with to start creating CS80 patches, so they're actually in the ballpark right from the word go. So I'm just doing that at the moment, Manny. But good to know that. New comments.
But speaking to those things, it's best to try and play the preset as is before you start dialing it down. If it's too much, it's too much. But like on a violin, I used to play violin as a kid. I can't change that. It is what it is. So I'm just trying to. You have to adapt to the instrument to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Or you can turn it down. It's either way's fine. But
And right, I'm just hearing that it's. I'm going to be in trouble. I thought we'd be done about now-ish. Or in fact, about 10. So I'm gonna have to love you and leave you, gents.
Okay.
But
Well, you contributed quite a bit, so well done.
great to be here, Henrik. Thank you for having me on.
You're most welcome.
And apologies to everyone in the chat for me taking up so much airtime, as it were. I do blether, but it's great to see you all, and thank you so much, Andy, Steve, Henrik, and Manny. Cheers now. God bless.
Right,
Bye.
okay. Cheers.
See
yeah.
you. Steve, did we get through all on your list?
I think we probably did.
Oh, good.
And I'm not. I don't know everything. I mean, obviously I do. But,
Neither do I.
lie a lot. What else? The only other things I got down here are things like filter gates using patterns and slices and octave divider type effects, things like that. That's like pitch effects and basically amp effects, isn't it? You're slicing up the things. But I mean, overall, I mean, I'm not sure what we were trying to achieve in the talk. What's the sort of goal you were hoping to do, and see if we can nail that down and try and wrap that up.
The goal was to make it cozy, to just enjoy talking about it. That's the goal of this show.
Oh, I think we did that. That's easy then.
So I think we reached the goal. So perhaps it's time to say goodnight this time.
Yeah, it's a good chat, wasn't it?
Yeah. I was a bit fast ending it last time. It was just like, oh, now it's over. I'm sorry for that, but
It's live, isn't it? What can you do? It's done.
yeah, it's live. Yeah, and I'm only human, so. But again, it has been wonderful to have you on, and it was a day where many of the invited guests couldn't make it, so that happens, especially when it's Saturdays we do the show.
Well, Saturdays is the weekend, isn't it? It's people do things at the weekend, so yeah.
So, but I really enjoyed having you here. So thank you very much. And also, and also the chatters. I have to remember them. I didn't mention them last time. Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure doing a show for you. So I hope you will come back next time.
Okay. On.
So, Andy, do you have anything to say before we end?
No, I think we pretty much covered most of the bases. So yeah, good topic, good details. A lot of stuff came up. Some stuff I hadn't thought of. Other things that were reiterating things. It's just all reinforcing things. It's good. Good stuff.
Same here. Yeah. And Steve, do you have anything to say?
Not really. I think we said most of the things. It's like just the only thing I would say is whatever your project is you're working on. If we're talking to the chatty people or to everybody else, is always keep your eye on your main goal of what you're trying to achieve. Although, having said that, you might find an effect might open something up and take you in a different direction, which might be beneficial. So yeah, it's hard to there's no defined way of getting a good successful outcome on anything. Just try ideas out, try anything out, and see how it works.
But what is success? Is it to reach the goal or enjoy to reach what you reach?
Well, yeah, it depends what your goal is. You know,
yeah,
goal
I think the joy is the important thing.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, enjoy it or do something else.
Because if you're not enjoying it, you won't be doing it next time, will you? Because you didn't enjoy
exactly.
it. So yeah, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Like the keyboard guy in Spinal Tap. Have a good time all the time. That's my philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The next show is about Superbooth. If it's about a month before Superbooth, in 3 weeks from now. And why it's that early is because most of the people who want to talk about Superbooth or is going to Superbooth don't have the time 3 weeks later because of Superbooth.
Yeah.
So
Fine, yeah.
So in 3 weeks' time, it's about Superbooth on the Senior Synth show, Synth Stream. I promised Geosynth to say Synth Stream, not Synth Show, and I think it's right. So, so thank you very much for being here.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So
Have a
good
great
night
weekend, everybody.
and good afternoon, Andy.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, good
Yes.
morning or good
Yeah,
afternoon.
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, whatever. This still's light back there.
Yeah.
Bye.